6 masked assassins, 1 decorated Navy SEAL working undercover as a bartender, 8 minutes that would expose a deadly conspiracy and ignite an impossible love story. When ex-Special Forces operative Garrett Flynn walked into that San Diego gala, he had no idea his 8-year-old daughter's whispered warning would thrust him back into the world he'd left behind, or that saving billionaire CEO Hannah Clark's life would become the beginning of his greatest mission yet. Before we dive in, drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The crystal chandeliers of the Meridian Grand Ballroom cast dancing light across 500 of San Diego's wealthiest elite, their champagne glasses catching the glow like liquid gold. Garrett Flynn moved through the crowd with practiced invisibility, his black vest and bow tie marking him as part of the furniture, just another hired hand serving drinks to people who'd never remember his face. That was exactly how he wanted it. "Another whiskey, neat," barked a hedge fund manager whose Rolex probably cost more than Garrett's annual rent. Garrett nodded, his calloused hands that had once rappelled down enemy compounds and diffused IEDs in the darkness of foreign deserts, now expertly tilting a bottle of 30-year-old Macallan. "Right away, sir." The man didn't even glance at him. To these people, Garrett was a ghost, a means to an end, someone who existed only to facilitate their comfort and then vanish back into the shadows. And honestly, after 8 years in naval special warfare, after the missions that still woke him at 3 a.m. with his heart hammering and sweat soaking his sheets, after losing Sarah to cancer while he was deployed halfway around the world, invisibility felt like mercy. He'd hung up his trident 3 years ago, walked away from the only life he'd known since he was 22 years old. Now, at 35, Garrett Flynn was just a single dad trying to make rent and keep his daughter's world stable. The tips from these charity galas, where tech billionaires and venture capitalists patted themselves on back for donating a fraction of their wealth, paid for Zoe's art classes and the small 2-bedroom apartment they called home. "Dad!" The whisper cut through the ambient music and cocktail chatter. Garrett turned to see his daughter peeking around the corner of the service hallway, her blonde pigtails slightly askew, clutching a coloring book decorated with mermaids and dolphins. He smiled, the real smile that only Zoe could summon, the one that cracked through the armor he wore every day. "What's up, Zobear? Thought you were going to finish that underwater castle." "I did. Want to see?" She bounded toward him with 8-year-old enthusiasm, her light-up sneakers blinking with each step. For these events, when he couldn't find a sitter, she'd camp out in the back hallway with her art supplies. The catering manager, Maria, always sneaked her chicken fingers and apple juice. It wasn't ideal, but it was their reality. Garrett crouched down, careful not to spill the tray of champagne flutes balanced on his left hand. Zoe thrust the coloring book toward him, and he examined her work with the seriousness it deserved. She'd stayed mostly inside the lines, used a rainbow gradient for the castle towers, and added a family of sea turtles he didn't remember being part of the original design. "That's incredible, sweetheart. I love the turtles. What are their names?" "That's Shelley, and that's Crush, and that's Flynn." The sharp voice of his supervisor, Richard, sliced through their moment. "We need you on the floor. They're about to start speeches, and we're running low on the Veuve Clicquot." Garrett stood, ruffling Zoe's hair. "Duty calls. You good here for a bit longer?" She nodded, but then grabbed his sleeve with small fingers. Her blue eyes, so much like her mother's it sometimes hurt to look directly at them, had gone serious. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "That lady up there." Zoe pointed toward the stage where a woman in an elegant navy dress was being introduced by the master of ceremonies. "She looks scared." Garrett followed his daughter's gesture. The woman was Hannah Clark, founder and CEO of NeuralSync Technologies, a company that had revolutionized cybersecurity and made her one of the youngest self-made female billionaires in America. He recognized her from the event program. She was tonight's keynote speaker and the guest of honor. The gala's purpose was to raise funds for STEM education, and Hannah had pledged to match all donations dollar for dollar. She stood in a spotlight, smiling and waving at the applauding crowd. To anyone else, she probably looked perfectly composed, poised, confident, radiating the kind of success that came from building an empire from scratch. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant updo, diamond earrings caught the light, and her posture was impeccable. But Garrett Flynn hadn't survived 8 years as a Navy SEAL by taking things at face value. He studied her with the trained eye of someone who'd spent years identifying threats and reading enemy combatants across hostile territory. The smile didn't reach her eyes. Her left hand, the one not holding the microphone, was clenched into a fist at her side. Every few seconds, her gaze darted toward the exits. Not casually, but with the hypervigilance of someone tracking potential threats. She was scanning for danger. "What do you mean, scared?" he asked Zoe, though his instincts were already firing warning signals through his nervous system. "I don't know. Her smile is wrong. Like when you used to smile at parents-teacher conferences after mom died, but you were really sad inside." Jesus. His daughter was far too perceptive for 8 years old. "Flynn, now!" Richard's voice had taken on that particular pitch that meant Garrett's job was on the line if he didn't move. "Stay right here, okay? Don't leave this hallway. Maria's around the corner if you need anything." He squeezed her shoulder, then grabbed a fresh tray and merged back into the crowd. But as he navigated through clusters of donors, his attention kept drifting back to the stage. Hannah Clark had begun her speech, talking about the importance of giving girls access to technology education, about breaking glass ceilings, about creating opportunities. Her voice was smooth, practiced, hitting all the right notes. And she was absolutely terrified. Garrett could see it in the way her breathing was slightly too controlled, in how her free hand had moved to grip the podium's edge, in the almost imperceptible tremor when she reached for her water glass. He'd seen that look before, on hostages, on soldiers pinned down under fire, on people who knew danger was coming but couldn't escape it. And that's why I'm so passionate about ensuring every young woman has the tools to pursue careers in technology, Hannah was saying, her voice projecting confidence that her body language betrayed. Because the future belongs to those we empower today. Applause rippled through the ballroom. Garrett distributed champagne to a group of venture capitalists arguing about market valuations and cryptocurrency, but his mind was elsewhere. His combat instincts, dormant for 3 years but never truly gone, were coming alive like an old wound in cold weather. Something was wrong. He scanned the room with fresh eyes, looking beyond the glittering facade. The layout of the ballroom, 4 exits, 2 main doors at the front, service entrance to the kitchen, emergency exit stage left. Security. He'd counted 6 guards when he arrived, standard rent-a-cops with basic training, positioned at entry points. Windows, floor to ceiling along the western wall, overlooking the bay. Potential breach points. Too many. His team leader's voice echoed in memory. "Trust your gut, Flynn. If something feels wrong, it usually is. The moment you ignore that feeling is the moment people die." "Excuse me, can I get a refill?" A woman in a dress that probably cost more than his truck waved an empty glass at him. "Of course, ma'am." He poured on autopilot, his eyes continuing their threat assessment. Most of the staff looked familiar. He'd worked a dozen of these events. But there, near the kitchen entrance, were 2 waiters he didn't recognize. Young, fit, with the kind of posture that suggested military training. They weren't serving anyone, just standing in position, watching Hannah. Garrett's pulse kicked up. Maybe he was paranoid. PTSD did that. Made you see threats in shadows, turned birthday balloons into IEDs, transformed fireworks into gunfire. His therapist, Dr. Martinez, had warned him about hypervigilance, about how the brain's threat detection system could go haywire after years of actual combat. But Zoe had noticed something too, and Zoe hadn't spent years in war zones. On stage, Hannah concluded her speech to enthusiastic applause. She smiled, that same wrong smile his daughter had spotted, and accepted a bouquet of flowers from the event coordinator. As she descended the stage stairs, Garrett noticed 2 men in dark suits moving to flank her. Private security, probably, but they looked tense, hands near their waistbands where weapons would be concealed. The evening continued its choreographed dance. Dinner was served, seared Chilean sea bass and herb-crusted lamb, neither of which Garrett would taste. He poured wine, cleared plates, fetched more champagne. All the while, his gaze kept returning to Hannah Clark, now seated at the head table, barely touching her food, speaking in tight smiles with the donors around her. An hour passed. Then another. Zoe poked her head out twice more, once to show him she'd started a new coloring page, once to ask when they could go home. "Soon, sweetheart," he promised, though these events usually ran until 11 or midnight. At 9:47 p.m., the lights dimmed for a video presentation about the STEM initiative. Garrett was in the back corner, near the kitchen, when he saw the two unfamiliar waiters exchange a glance. One touched his ear, the universal gesture of someone listening to a communication device. That was when the main doors burst open. The sound of splintering wood cut through the promotional video's soundtrack. Screams erupted as 6 figures in black tactical gear and white masks stormed into the ballroom, moving with military precision. They weren't theatrical about it. No shouting, no waving guns around, just smooth professional efficiency. The lead figure raised a weapon. Not a gun, but something else. Garrett's mind cataloged it instantly. Tranquilizer rifle. Before he could move, the man fired. A dart whistled through the air and struck one of Hannah's bodyguards in the neck. He went down like a puppet with cut strings. "Everyone down! This is a security operation!" The voice boomed from speakers. They'd hacked into the audio system. "Remain seated and no one gets hurt." The ballroom descended into chaos. Guests screamed, dropped to the floor, overturned tables. Wine glasses shattered. Someone's phone clattered across marble. The rent-a-cop security guards reached for their weapons, but 2 were already down from tranquilizer darts. The others hesitated, outgunned and outmatched. The attackers moved as a unit, trained, coordinated. 2 secured the exits. 2 began corralling guests. The remaining 2 headed directly for Hannah Clark. Everything slowed down, the way it always had in combat. That strange temporal distortion where seconds stretched like honey, where Garrett's senses sharpened to impossible acuity. He could hear individual heartbeats, could track multiple moving threats, could calculate angles and distances and outcomes with the cold precision of a machine designed for violence. He'd left the Navy. He'd walked away from warfare. He'd promised Sarah's memory that he'd never go back to that life, that he'd be just a dad, just a regular guy, just someone safe for his daughter to depend on. But here's the thing about training that gets hardwired into your nervous system, about instincts honed across 50 combat missions. You don't forget. Your body doesn't forget. And when innocents are in danger, when you're the only thing standing between predators and prey, you don't get to stay invisible anymore. Garrett's eyes snapped to the service hallway. Through the crowd, he could just see the entrance where Zoe was hidden. She'd be hearing the screams, the chaos. She'd be terrified. "Stay there, baby. Stay hidden. Please, God, stay hidden." The 2 attackers reached Hannah. She'd stood from her seat, backing away, but there was nowhere to go. Her security, what was left of them, were either unconscious or being subdued. One attacker grabbed her arm. She tried to jerk away, and that's when Garrett saw the flash of something in the man's hand. A syringe. They weren't here to rob the gala. They were here to take Hannah Clark. This was a targeted kidnapping operation, executed by professionals with military training and insider intelligence. And Garrett Flynn, the invisible bartender who just wanted to pay rent and keep his daughter safe, had a choice to make. He could stay down, could keep his head lowered, wait for it to be over, could keep his promise to never be that person again, never be the weapon, never risk leaving Zoe an orphan. That was the smart choice, the safe choice. Or he could do what he'd spent 8 years training to do. The attacker with the syringe moved toward Hannah's neck. She struggled, and for just a moment her eyes met Garrett's across the chaos of the ballroom. In that instant, he saw the same expression he'd seen in the faces of hostages he'd rescued from compounds in Yemen and Syria. The desperate hope that someone, anyone, would help. "Could you tell your daughter you walked away while someone needed help?" The question came from his own mind, in Sarah's voice. His wife, who'd spent her too short life as an ER nurse, running toward emergencies when everyone else ran away. Who'd taught Zoe to stand up for kids being bullied at school? Who'd believed that the strong had an obligation to protect the weak? Garrett set down his tray. His body moved before his conscious mind finished deciding. Years of muscle memory took over, and suddenly he wasn't a bartender anymore. The invisible mask dropped, and something else emerged, something that had been sleeping but never truly gone. He crossed the distance in 4 strides, silent as a ghost. The attacker with the syringe never saw him coming. Garrett's hand shot out, caught the man's wrist, twisted with precise force. The syringe clattered to the floor. Before the attacker could react, Garrett drove his elbow into the man's solar plexus, a strike that calculated exactly how much force to use, where to hit to disable without killing. The attacker doubled over, gasping. His partner spun toward Garrett, reaching for a weapon, but Garrett was already moving. A leg sweep dropped the man to one knee. A targeted strike to the radial nerve made his hand spasm, weapon falling. Garrett caught it before it hit the ground, a Sig Sauer P-126, good weapon. Ejected the magazine, racked the slide to clear the chamber, disassembled it in 3 seconds flat. Parts scattered across expensive marble. The entire exchange took 6 seconds. Hannah stared at him, eyes wide with shock. "What?" "Stay behind me." His voice had changed too, harder, colder. The voice of someone who'd given orders in firefights and hostage rescues. "Don't move unless I tell you to move." The 4 other attackers had noticed. They abandoned their crowd control positions and converged on Garrett's location. Amateur move. They'd left the exits unsecured, focused all their attention on one target. Poor tactical discipline. "Who the hell is this guy?" one of them said into his comm unit, Russian accent bleeding through. Russian. That was important intel. Garrett filed it away. "I'm just the bartender," Garrett said calmly, positioning himself between Hannah and the incoming threats. His mind was running calculations. 4 hostiles, close quarters, civilians in crossfire zones, unknown weapons loadout, daughter in adjacent hallway, approximately 40 feet away. The lead attacker, the one who'd first entered, raised his tranquilizer rifle. "Stand down, friend. This doesn't concern you." "See, that's where you're wrong. The lady asked for a drink earlier, and I've got a professional obligation to make sure she gets good service." Garrett's hands were loose at his sides, balanced on the balls of his feet. Ready. "Last chance. Walk away." "Can't do that." The attacker fired. Garrett moved, not away from the dart, but toward it, into the shooter's range where the angle became difficult. The dart whistled past his shoulder by inches. He was already inside the shooter's guard, hand locking around the rifle barrel, twisting, bone cracked, radius fracture, clean break. The shooter screamed. Garrett stripped the weapon, reversed it, used the stock to strike another attacker reaching for him. 2 down. A third attacker came from his left, knife drawn. Garrett sidestepped, caught the knife arm, applied a standing armbar. The attacker's elbow hyperextended with a wet pop. Garrett trapped the falling knife with his foot, kicked it away. 3 down. But he'd lost track of the 4th attacker in the chaos. Critical mistake. Pain exploded in his back as something struck him. Taser. 50,000 volts locked his muscles, dropped him to one knee. Through blurred vision, he saw the 4th attacker standing over him with the taser, smiling behind his white mask. "Not bad for a bartender," the man said, "but not good enough." The taser hit him again. Garrett's world turned white with pain. His muscles seized, refused to obey commands. He tried to rise, couldn't. Hannah was screaming something he couldn't quite hear over the ringing in his ears. The attacker who'd first had the syringe, the one Garrett had disarmed, had recovered it. He advanced on Hannah, who'd backed against a table with nowhere left to run. "No, get up, move, move!" Garrett's body wouldn't cooperate. The residual effects of the taser had scrambled his nervous system. He could only watch as the syringe got closer to Hannah's neck. Then, impossibly, something small and fast launched from the side hallway. A blur of blonde pigtails and light-up sneakers. Zoe, clutching her coloring book, swung it at the attacker's head with all the force her 8-year-old body could muster. "Leave her alone!" Time stopped. The coloring book struck the attacker's mask, not hard enough to hurt, but unexpected enough to make him flinch. The syringe's trajectory shifted 6 inches left. Instead of Hannah's neck, it struck the table's edge. And in that half-second of distraction, Garrett found the strength to move. He surged upward, grabbed the attacker's arm, and drove forward with momentum born of pure fury. How dare they? How dare these bastards come here, threaten innocence, force his baby girl to witness violence? Every bit of strength he'd held back, the killing force he'd spent 3 years suppressing, came roaring back. The attacker went down hard. Garrett's forearm found the man's throat, applied pressure. Not enough to kill. but enough to render unconscious in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. The fifth attacker raised another tranquilizer rifle, aimed at Garrett's center mass. At this range, there was no dodging. Garrett twisted, tried to shield both Hannah and Zoe with his body, knowing he couldn't cover them both, that the math didn't work, that someone was going to get hurt, and please God, let it be him. The dart caught him in the upper chest. He felt the prick, felt the chemical burn spreading through his bloodstream. Sedative, fast-acting. His vision started to tunnel almost immediately. The ballroom swam into soft focus, sounds becoming distant and muffled. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was Hannah's face hovering over him, her hands on his shoulders. She was saying something. Her lips moved, forming words he couldn't hear. Behind her, police lights were flashing. Someone must have called 911, reinforcements arriving. But it was Zoe's face that filled his fading vision. His daughter being pulled back by the catering manager, Maria, her eyes wide with terror and tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Zobear," he tried to say. "I'm so sorry you had to see," but the words wouldn't come. The sedative pulled him down into chemical oblivion, and the world went black. The darkness lasted forever, and no time at all. In the space between consciousness and oblivion, Garrett drifted through memories that felt more real than reality. Sarah, laughing at their tiny apartment in Virginia Beach, her nurse's scrubs still on, dancing to old Motown while making dinner. "Come on, babe, you can't tell me Navy SEALs don't know how to dance." And him, spinning her around the kitchen, her joy infectious enough to make him forget the mission briefing waiting on his phone. The first time he held Zoe, this impossibly small human who'd somehow become his entire universe in the span of a heartbeat. Sarah exhausted but radiant beside him. "She has your eyes," she'd whispered. "Poor thing." Then darker memories. The ones that lived in locked rooms in his mind. Helmand Province, 3 a.m., clearing a compound room by room while rounds pinged off the walls. His teammate Jake taking fire, Garrett dragging him to cover while calling for medevac, both of them covered in blood and dust, and the particular terror that came from knowing death was 3 feet away. In Sarah's hospital room, the smell of antiseptic and flowers, her hand so thin in his, her voice barely a whisper. "Take care of our girl. Promise me. Take care of Zoe, and take care of yourself. Don't let this break you. Promise me, Garrett." "I promise." But he'd broken that promise tonight, hadn't he? He'd let Zoe see him like that. Let her witness her father as something violent and dangerous. Let her 8-year-old eyes watch him hurt people, even if those people deserved hurting. What kind of father does that make you? Consciousness returned gradually, layers of sensation building upon each other. First, pain. His head throbbed like someone had used it for drum practice. His chest ached where the dart had struck. His muscles felt like they'd been wrung out and left to dry. Second, sounds. Steady beeping, hushed voices, the distinctive squeaky wheel sound of a hospital gurney rolling past. Third, light. Even through closed eyelids, he could sense it, too bright, clinical, fluorescent. Finally, smell. Antiseptic, latex, that particular combination of cleaning products and human suffering that defined every hospital everywhere. Garrett opened his eyes. He was in a private hospital room, late at night judging by the darkness beyond the window. An IV drip fed into his left arm. Monitors tracked his vital signs with electronic efficiency. His bow tie and vest were gone, replaced with a hospital gown. Someone had removed his shoes, and sitting in the chair beside his bed, her elegant dress rumpled, her perfect updo partially fallen, her makeup smudged with exhaustion, was Hannah Clark. She dozed off, her head tilted at an angle that would give her a wicked crick in her neck. A cup of coffee, long cold, judging by the ring stain, sat on the side table beside a vase of flowers. How long had she been here? Garrett tried to sit up. The movement sent pain spiking through his chest, and he couldn't quite suppress the grunt that escaped. Hannah's eyes snapped open immediately. For a moment, she looked disoriented. Then her gaze locked on his face, and something like relief flooded her features. "You're awake." Her voice was hoarse, rough with emotion and fatigue. "Thank God. The doctor said you'd be fine, but—" She stopped, seemed to gather herself. "How are you feeling?" Like I got hit by a tranquilizer dart and tasered twice. Garrett's own voice came out gravelly. How long was I out? 6 hours. It's almost 4 a.m. Hannah leaned forward, and he could see the dark circles under her eyes, the stress written in every line of her face. The sedative they used was designed for large animals. The doctor said if you'd gotten a full dose instead of just a glancing hit. She didn't finish. Didn't need to. Zoe, Garrett said immediately, trying to sit up again despite the pain. My daughter, is she? She's fine. She's safe. Hannah put a gentle hand on his shoulder, easing him back. The catering manager, Maria, took her to the security office during the chaos. Police questioned her briefly, very gently. Child Services wanted to take her into temporary custody, but She paused, seeming uncertain. I hope this was okay, but I used some influence to make sure she could stay with Maria until you woke up. They're in the waiting room right now. The relief that crashed through Garrett was almost physical. Thank you. Jesus, thank you. I should be thanking you. You saved my life. Hannah's voice cracked slightly. You almost died saving my life. And your daughter, she was so brave. When I think about what could have happened, don't. Garrett's voice came out harder than intended. He softened it. Just don't go down that road. Trust me, it doesn't lead anywhere good. They sat in silence for a moment. Through the window, San Diego's lights twinkled in the pre-dawn darkness. Somewhere in this hospital, his daughter was waiting. Somewhere, a team of police detectives was probably preparing questions. Somewhere, the men who'd attacked the gala were either in custody or on the run. The police told me some things about you, Hannah said quietly. After the attack, they ran your background, of course, found out you weren't just a bartender. Garrett closed his eyes. Of course they had. His DD-214, his service record, all of it would have come up in their investigation. The carefully constructed anonymity he'd built around his life with Zoe shattered in one night. 8 years in naval special warfare, Hannah continued. Multiple deployments, distinguished service medals, commendations for valor in combat. You were part of some of the most elite operations in the Middle East. And then you just walked away, started working catering jobs. Why? That's a long conversation for 4 a.m. I've been here for 6 hours. I've got time. Garrett opened his eyes and looked at her, really looked at her. Without the stage makeup and practiced smile, she looked younger than her publicity photos suggested. Maybe 32, 33. But her eyes held the kind of weariness that came from carrying weight too heavy for any one person. I walked away because my wife died while I was deployed, he said simply. Because I came home to a daughter who'd lost her mother and barely knew her father. Because I'd spent 8 years running toward danger, and it was time to run toward something else. Someone else. Hannah's expression softened. I'm sorry. About your wife. So am I. He adjusted the IV line, wincing. What about you? Those men tonight? That wasn't a random robbery. That was a professional extraction team with inside intelligence and military training. They knew you'd be there, knew your security detail, knew the building layout. Someone went through a lot of trouble to take you alive. She was quiet for a long moment, her hands twisting together in her lap. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I've been getting threats for 3 months. Ever since Neuralink landed a major defense contract worth $800 million. We developed new encryption protocols that make current cyber warfare techniques obsolete. Several governments and private military companies wanted that technology. I turned them down. Let me guess. They didn't take no for an answer. The FBI has been investigating. They think it's connected to a Russian private military group with ties to their intelligence services. But they can't prove anything, and the threats kept escalating. Tonight was supposed to be safe. Public venue, high-profile guests, security everywhere. She laughed bitterly. Obviously that didn't work out. Inside job, Garrett said. Had to be. Those 2 waiters I spotted earlier, they were part of the team. They fed intel to the attack squad. Probably disabled some of your security measures before the breach. Hannah's eyes widened. You spotted them? Before the attack? Training. You learned to read rooms, identify threats. Your body language was wrong too. You were terrified during your speech. My head of security had gotten a tip that something might happen tonight. He wanted to cancel, but I refused. I thought, she shook her head. I thought if I showed fear, if I let them dictate my life, they'd already won. Stupid. Not stupid. Brave. There's a difference. Is there? Because brave almost got me kidnapped tonight, almost got you killed, almost traumatized your little girl. Hannah's composure cracked, and Garrett saw tears forming in her eyes. I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't been there. If you hadn't, but I was there, and you're safe. That's what matters. For now. But what about tomorrow? Next week? These people don't give up, Garrett. They want what I have, and they won't stop until they get it, or I'm dead. She wiped at her eyes angrily, as if mad at herself for showing weakness. The FBI agent I spoke with earlier suggested I go into protective custody. Disappear for a while. But I have a company to run, employees depending on me, contracts to fulfill. A knock at the door interrupted her. A police detective entered, followed by a woman in an FBI windbreaker. Behind them, Garrett caught a glimpse of Maria holding Zoe's hand in the hallway. Mr. Flynn, glad to see you're awake, the detective said. I'm Detective Morrison. This is Special Agent Chen. We need to ask you some questions about tonight's events. Can I see my doctor first? The detective glanced at Agent Chen, who nodded. 5 minutes? Maria led Zoe into the room. His daughter looked so small, still in her jeans and unicorn t-shirt, her pigtails messy from hours of stress. The moment she saw him, she burst into tears and ran to the bedside. Daddy! Garrett wrapped his good arm around her, pulled her close despite the pain it caused. She buried her face in his shoulder, her small body shaking with sobs. I'm okay, Zobeir. I'm okay. You're so brave. You were so brave tonight. I was scared. I thought they were going to... She couldn't finish, just held on to him tighter. I know, baby, I know. But it's over now. Everyone's safe. He stroked her hair, meeting Hannah's eyes over Zoe's head. Hannah had tears running freely down her face now, and she wasn't trying to hide them. Maria cleared her throat gently. I'll wait outside while you talk to the police, sweetie. Then we'll get you home, okay? I want to stay with Daddy. You can't right now, Garrett said softly. The doctors need to keep me here for a little bit. But Maria's going to take you back to our apartment, and I promise I'll be home before you wake up. Deal? Promise? Promise. It took another few minutes of reassurance before Zoe would let go. Maria led her back to the waiting room, and Garrett watched them go with an ache in his chest that had nothing to do with tranquilizer darts or tasers. The questioning took 45 minutes. He walked them through the evening from his perspective, spotting the unusual waiters, noticing Hannah's distress, the attack itself, his response. He left nothing out. His training, his combat experience, the specific techniques he'd used, let them know exactly who they were dealing with. 6 hostiles neutralized or delayed by 1 bartender, Agent Chen said, not quite hiding her skepticism. That's remarkable. I had help. Garrett looked at Hannah. And motivation. When they finally left, promising to follow up later, the sky outside had begun to lighten with dawn's approach. A doctor came in, checked Garrett's vitals, declared him stable enough to be discharged by mid-morning. Hannah stood to leave, exhaustion written in every movement. I should go. Let you rest. I needed to make sure you were okay. That's all. Hannah. She stopped at the door. You asked me earlier why I left the Navy. I told you it was for Zoe, and that's true. But it was also because I got tired of fighting other people's wars. He met her eyes. What happened tonight? That wasn't your fault. You didn't ask for this. And you don't deserve to spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. I don't have much choice. There's always a choice. Sometimes they all suck, but they exist. He paused, weighing his next words carefully. If you need help, real help, not FBI protective custody or rent-a-cops who go down in the first 30 seconds, I know people. Guys from my old unit who do private security now. I could make some calls. Why would you do that? You don't even know me. Because my daughter has to grow up in this world. And I'd like it to be the kind of world where people like you, people trying to do good things, make things better, don't get punished for it. He smiled tiredly. Plus, You did stay at my bedside for 6 hours. Seems like the least I could do. Hannah was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. Then she pulled a business card from her purse, walked back to the bed, and placed it on his side table. Call me when you get home. We'll talk. She paused at the door again. And Garrett, thank you. For everything. For seeing what no one else saw. For caring when you didn't have to. For being brave enough to fight when you'd promised yourself you wouldn't. I'm not brave. You are. Believe me, I know the difference. Then she was gone, her heels clicking softly down the hospital corridor, leaving Garrett alone with his thoughts and the promise of a sunrise he'd almost not lived to see. The morning sun was already climbing high when Garrett finally pulled his battered Ford pickup into the parking lot of their apartment complex. The discharge paperwork sat on the passenger seat, along with prescriptions for pain medication he probably wouldn't take and a follow-up appointment he'd probably miss. His chest still ached where the dart had hit. His muscles protested every movement. But he was alive and he was home. That was enough. Maria's car was already parked in its usual spot. She'd texted him an hour ago that Zoe had finally fallen asleep around 6, curled up on their couch with her coloring book clutched to her chest like a shield. The image had broken something inside him all over again. He took the stairs slowly, each step a reminder of the previous night's violence. Their apartment was on the 3rd floor, number 312, a modest 2-bedroom with peeling paint on the door and a welcome mat Zoe had picked out because it had a cat on it. Not much to look at, but it was theirs. Safe. Ordinary. Or it had been, until last night. Maria opened the door before he could get his key out, her round face creased with concern. She was in her 50s, a grandmother of 4 who'd worked catering for 20 years and had seen enough of life to take most things in stride. But even she looked shaken. She finally went down about 2 hours ago, Maria whispered, gesturing to where Zoe lay sleeping on the couch, still in yesterday's clothes. Poor baby. She was so worried about you. Kept asking if you were okay, if you were hurt, if... Her voice caught. Garrett, what she saw last night. I know. He moved past her into the apartment, his eyes fixed on his daughter's sleeping form. I know, Maria, and I'm sorry. I never wanted... Don't you dare apologize for protecting people. Maria's voice was fierce despite its low volume. What you did was heroic. Stupid, maybe, but heroic. Those men would have taken Ms. Clark, probably killed people in the process. You stopped them. At what cost? Garrett knelt beside the couch, brushing a strand of blonde hair from Zoe's face. She looked so peaceful in sleep, so innocent. She's 8 years old, Maria. She shouldn't have nightmares about her father fighting armed men. She shouldn't have to see... She saw her father be brave. She saw him protect someone who needed help. There are worse things a child could learn. Maria squeezed his shoulder gently. I'll leave you two alone. Call me if you need anything, okay? Anything at all. After she left, Garrett just sat on the floor beside the couch, watching his daughter sleep. The morning light filtered through their thin curtains, illuminating the small space they'd built together over the past 3 years. Photos of Sarah still hung on the walls. He'd never had the heart to take them down, and Zoe liked having her mother's smile watching over them. The kitchen was tiny but functional. Zoe's bedroom was an explosion of art supplies and stuffed animals. This was supposed to be their safe place, their normal life, away from danger and violence and the things that went bump in the night. He'd failed her. Zoe stirred around 10, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment she looked disoriented. Then her gaze found him and she sat up fast. Dad, you're home. You promised you'd be home and you are. I promised, didn't I? He moved to sit beside her on the couch, wrapping an arm around her small shoulders. How are you feeling, Zobear? She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on her coloring book. When she spoke, her voice was small and uncertain. Dad? Those men last night. They were bad people, right? Yes, sweetheart. Very bad people. And you stopped them because that's what good people do? They stop bad people from hurting others? That's right. So why do I feel scared? Her blue eyes, Sarah's eyes, looked up at him, confused and hurt. If you're good and they were bad, why do I feel scared of you? Just a little bit, in my tummy. The words hit him like a physical blow. This was what he'd feared most, what had kept him awake during deployments and made him leave the Navy in the first place, that his daughter would see him as something dangerous, something to be afraid of. "Come here." He pulled her close, feeling her small heartbeat against his chest. "What you saw last night, that's not who I am. Not really. That's just something I learned how to do a long time ago, before you were born. Like a skill, like how you can draw and paint. But just because I can do something doesn't mean that's all I am. Like how you know how to cook, but you're not a chef?" Despite everything, he smiled. "Exactly like that. I know how to fight, how to protect people when they're in danger. But mostly, I'm just your dad who makes terrible pancakes and can't braid hair right and forgets to put the toilet seat down." She giggled softly, and the sound was the most beautiful thing he'd heard in hours. "You make okay pancakes. Not terrible." Such high praise. They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, the morning stretching out around them. Finally, Zoe spoke again, her voice steadier now. "That lady, Ms. Clark, she's really nice. When the police were asking me questions, she made sure they were gentle, and she bought me hot chocolate with extra marshmallows." "She did?" "Uh-huh. And she said you were very brave. She said you saved her life and she'd never forget it." Zoe looked up at him seriously. "Did you really save her life, Dad?" "I helped. A lot of people helped. But mostly you." It wasn't a question. "Maria told me that without you, those bad men would have taken Miss Clark away and maybe hurt other people too. So you being scary for a little bit saved lots of people from being scared all the time." Out of the mouths of babes, Garrett felt his throat tighten with emotion. "When did you get so wise?" "I'm 8. That's pretty old." She snuggled closer. "Can we have pancakes now? I'm really hungry." They spent the rest of the morning in their pajamas, making breakfast and carefully not talking about the previous night. Zoe colored at the kitchen table while Garrett cleaned up, both of them settling back into their familiar routines like finding an old, comfortable groove. It was almost possible to pretend everything was normal. Until his phone rang. The number wasn't saved in his contacts, but he recognized the area code. His stomach tightened as he answered. "Flynn?" "Mr. Flynn, this is Special Agent Chen. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Just making pancakes with my daughter. What can I do for you, Agent?" "I wanted to follow up on a few things from last night. We've identified all 6 attackers. They're Russian nationals, former Spetsnaz, working for a private military contractor called Volkova Group. Ring any bells?" Garrett's blood went cold. He knew that name. Every SEAL who'd operated in Eastern Europe or the Middle East knew that name. Volkova Group was the kind of organization that made governments nervous and defense contractors wealthy. They operated in the gray spaces between legal and illegal, military and mercenary. "Yeah, I know them. They're serious players. Not the kind of outfit you hire for a simple kidnapping." "Exactly. Which brings me to my next point. Ms. Clark is in significant danger. The FBI can offer protective custody, but she's refusing, says it would shut down her company, put hundreds of employees at risk, make her a prisoner instead of a victim." Chen paused. "She also mentioned you might be able to help." "Agent Chen, I'm not in that business anymore. I'm a single dad working catering jobs." A single dad who took down 6 trained operatives with his bare hands. There was respect in her voice, but also calculation. "Look, I get it. You walked away for good reasons, but Ms. Clark needs protection that federal resources can't provide. She needs someone who understands how these groups operate, someone who can think like them, predict their moves, someone with your particular skill set." "I have a daughter to think about." "I know, which is why I'm calling you instead of just showing up at your door. This is your choice, Mr. Flynn, but you should know, the attackers we caught aren't talking. They lawyered up immediately, and the lawyers are expensive. The kind of expensive that suggests serious backing. Volkova Group doesn't give up after one failed attempt. They'll come at her again, and next time they'll be better prepared." Garrett looked at Zoe, still coloring peacefully at the table, humming some song from a movie he couldn't quite place. This was supposed to be their quiet life, their safe life. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "That's all I can promise." "Fair enough. One more thing, we found something during the investigation. Security footage from the gala that was interesting." Chen's tone changed, became more cautious. There's about 15 seconds where you're visible in the frame, engaging the hostiles. Mr. Flynn, I've seen combat footage. I've watched Special Forces operators work. What you did? That was different. That was surgical, precise. Like you weren't just trained, you were built for it. Was there a question in there, Agent? Just an observation, and maybe a warning. You're on a lot of radars now. The kind of radars that don't forget faces or skill sets. You wanted to be invisible, to live a quiet life. That option might not be available anymore. After she hung up, Garrett stood in the kitchen holding his phone, staring at nothing in particular. Chen was right, and he knew it. The moment he'd engaged those attackers, the moment he'd chosen to fight instead of hide, he'd put himself back on the map. Organizations like Volkova Group would have seen the news reports, the witness statements. They'd know someone with serious training had interfered, and they'd be very interested in finding out who. His phone rang again, making him jump. This time he recognized the number. It was the one from Hannah's business card. Garrett? It's Hannah Clark. I hope I'm not bothering you. Not at all. Just finished talking to the FBI. Agent Chen called me too. She really wants me to go into protective custody. Hannah's voice was strained, tired. I can't do that, Garrett. I can't just disappear. I have board meetings scheduled, product launches, employees counting on me. I know. The thing is, she hesitated. I've been thinking about what you said at the hospital, about knowing people who could help. I know I have no right to ask, and I know you have your daughter to consider, but she took a breath. Would you be willing to meet with me, just to talk about options? I'll pay for your time, obviously, and I promise I won't pressure you into anything you're not comfortable with. Garrett watched Zoe add purple sparkles to what looked like an underwater princess castle. His daughter, his responsibility, his whole world. But then he thought about Hannah's face on that stage, the fear she'd tried so hard to hide, the desperation in her eyes when those men had grabbed her, the reality that she'd spent every day looking over her shoulder, waiting for the next attack, unless someone helped her. When did you want to meet? They agreed on that afternoon, at a coffee shop in La Jolla that Hannah said had good privacy and better security. Garrett called Maria to ask if she could watch Zoe for a few hours. She agreed without hesitation, sensing this was important. Dad, where are you going? Zoe asked as he changed into clean jeans and a button-down shirt, the closest thing to professional he owned. Just a meeting with Ms. Clark. Remember the lady from last night? Are you going to help her? Those 8-year-old eyes pinned him with uncomfortable accuracy. I don't know yet, sweetheart. That's what we're going to talk about. I think you should. Zoe went back to her coloring. She needs you, and Mom always said we should help people who need us. How did you argue with that? The coffee shop was tucked into a corner of La Jolla's tourist district, surrounded by art galleries and overpriced boutiques. Hannah was already there when Garrett arrived, sitting at a back corner table wearing designer jeans and a simple blouse, a far cry from the elegant gown of the previous night. She'd pulled her dark hair into a ponytail and wore minimal makeup. Without the CEO armor, she looked younger, more vulnerable. She stood when she saw him extending a hand. Thank you for coming. I know this is probably the last thing you want to deal with. It's fine. He shook her hand, firm grip, confident, and sat down. You look better than you did at 4 a.m. Low bar. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I got maybe 2 hours of sleep, kept replaying last night over and over. What happened? What could have happened? What will happen next? A barista came over, and they ordered black coffee for him, some complicated latte for her. When they were alone again, Hannah folded her hands on the table and looked at him directly. I'm going to be straight with you because I think you appreciate that. The FBI says Volkova Group won't stop. They've invested too much money and resources into getting their hands on my encryption technology. If they can't buy it, they'll steal it. And if they can't steal it, they'll take me and force me to give it to them. Agent Chen mentioned that. What she probably didn't mention is that I've already had 2 attempts on my life before last night. One car accident that wasn't really an accident, one break-in at my home that wasn't really a robbery. My security team has stopped 3 more attempts we can prove and probably a dozen we can't. Hannah's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. I'm 28 years old, Garrett. I built my company from scratch in my dorm room at MIT. I turned down billions in acquisition offers because I believed in what we were creating, technology that could protect people's privacy, keep their data safe from government overreach and corporate exploitation. And now I'm being punished for that belief. I'm sorry, that's not fair. Life rarely is. She took a sip of her latte. But here's what I've learned. I can either accept being a victim or I can fight back. Going into protective custody is accepting being a victim. It's letting them win without even taking me. So I'm choosing to fight. But I can't do it alone. Garrett leaned back in his chair, studying her. There was steel underneath the exhaustion, a core of determination that reminded him of some of the toughest officers he'd served under. She'd built an empire from nothing in less than a decade. That didn't happen without serious grit. What exactly are you asking me to do? Honestly, I'm not sure yet. I need someone who understands how these groups operate. Someone who can assess my current security, identify vulnerabilities, maybe even help me figure out who inside my organization is feeding them information, because that's the only way they could have known so much about last night. She met his eyes. I know you're not a bodyguard. I know you left that life behind. But you saved me once, and I'm hoping, maybe, you'd be willing to help me save myself. I have a daughter, Hannah. She has to be my first priority. I know. And I'd never ask you to put her at risk. We could structure this however works for you. Consulting basis, remote work, limited hours. Hell, I'll hire full security for your apartment if that would help. Whatever you need. Money's not the issue. Then what is? Garrett was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. When I was in the teams, I saw things. Did things. Some of them necessary, some of them I'm still not sure about. I watched good men die because of split-second decisions, because of intelligence that was wrong, because chaos doesn't care about training or skill or good intentions. And I lived with that. Had to compartmentalize it, lock it away, tell myself it was for a greater good. He looked out the window at the tourists walking by, normal people living normal lives. When Sarah got sick, I was deployed. Couldn't get home in time. She died surrounded by nurses and chaplains while I was 8,000 miles away in a country I can't even name, doing work I can't ever talk about. And I realized, what's the point of saving the world if you lose everything that makes your world worth saving? Hannah's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I can't imagine what that must have been like. I came home to a daughter who barely knew me, who'd lost her mother and was terrified she'd lose her father too. And I made a promise, to her, to Sarah's memory, to myself, that I was done. Done being that person, done living that life, done risking everything for fights that weren't mine. He turned back to face her. Last night broke that promise, and I saw the look in Zoe's eyes afterward, the fear, the confusion, the worry that her dad might not come home next time. I understand, and I'm not going to pressure you or guilt you or let me finish. He held up a hand. But I also saw your face when those men grabbed you, and I thought about what would have happened if I'd done nothing, if I'd stayed invisible like I wanted to. You'd be gone right now, probably in a basement somewhere being tortured for information, or dead if you'd refused to cooperate. And those men, they wouldn't have stopped there. They'd have hurt other people, taken other victims, because that's what happens when good people do nothing. He leaned forward. So here's what I'm willing to do. I'll consult for you, review your security, identify problems, maybe make some recommendations. But I'm not coming back full time. I'm not becoming your bodyguard or your operative or whatever. And if at any point I feel like this is putting Zoe at risk, I'm out. No negotiation, no guilt trip, just done. Can you work with that? Hannah's relief was visible. Yes, absolutely yes. Thank you, Garrett. You have no idea how much. Don't thank me yet. This is just consultation, and I need you to understand something. These people you're up against? Volkova Group doesn't play by rules. They're smart, well-funded, and absolutely ruthless. You're not just fighting a company, you're fighting an ideology that says the strong take what they want and the weak suffer. They will not stop unless you make them stop. And making them stop might require things you're not comfortable with. Like what? Like proactive measures instead of reactive. Like identifying their assets and eliminating them before they can act. Like fighting fire with napalm. He held her gaze. Are you prepared for that? Because if we're doing this, we need to do it right. Half measures will just get people killed. Hannah was quiet for a long moment, her coffee cooling in her hands. When she spoke, her voice was steady. My whole life I've played by the rules. Studied hard, worked hard, built my company the right way. And you know what? The people trying to destroy me don't care about rules. They tried to kidnap me at a charity gala. They're willing to kill innocent people to get what they want. So if fighting back means getting my hands dirty, if it means being proactive instead of reactive, she looked him dead in the eye. Then yes, I'm prepared, because I'm done being a victim. Garrett nodded slowly. Maybe she had the steel for this after all. They spent the next 2 hours going over details. Hannah outlined her current security setup, a team of 12 guards, mix of ex-military and law enforcement, working in rotating shifts. Her home was a penthouse downtown with decent physical security but questionable digital infrastructure. Her office building had standard corporate security, which meant it was probably compromised 6 ways from Sunday. She drove a different route to work every day, varied her schedule, never announced public appearances in advance. It sounds like you're already doing a lot right, Garrett said, taking notes on his phone. But it's not enough, obviously. Hannah's frustration was clear. I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on security and they still almost got me. That's because you're defending against symptoms instead of the disease. Volkova Group wants your encryption technology, so we need to figure out why they want it and who's paying them to get it. Follow the money, find the client, eliminate the incentive. The FBI is already investigating us. The FBI moves at government speed and needs things like warrants and probable cause. We don't have that luxury. Garrett leaned back. I need access to your company's internal communications, HR records, financial data. Whoever's feeding information to Volkova is on your payroll. They're probably not even doing it for ideology. Just money. Find them. Find the leak. I can give you limited access, but Garrett, I have 1,200 employees going through all of them. Won't take that long. We're looking for specific patterns. Sudden wealth, unusual travel, encrypted communications, meetings with unknown parties. Someone in your organization is dirty, and they're leaving breadcrumbs whether they know it or not. They were interrupted by Garrett's phone buzzing, a text from Maria. Zoe's asking when you'll be home. She's worried. His chest tightened. I need to go. My daughter. Of course, go. Hannah stood as well. Can we meet again tomorrow? I'll have access credentials set up for you, and I want you to meet my head of security. His name's Marcus Webb, former Secret Service. Good guy, but he's been focused on physical security and might be missing some bigger picture stuff. Tomorrow works, but Hannah, one more thing. Garrett fixed her with a serious look. If we're doing this, you need to be completely honest with me. No corporate spin, no holding back information because you think it makes you look bad or might be legally problematic. These people play for keeps, and I need to know everything if I'm going to help you. I understand. Do you? Because in my experience, civilians say they understand until they actually have to face the ugly truths. Whatever skeletons are in your closet, whatever questionable decisions you've made, whatever secrets you're keeping, I need to know them. Because Volkova Group probably already does, and they will use them against you. Hannah's expression hardened. I built my company ethically. I don't have skeletons. Everyone has skeletons. The question is whether you're willing to show them to me before they get dug up in ways that hurt you. He softened his tone slightly. I'm not judging you, Hannah. I'm trying to protect you, but I can't do that effectively if you're hiding things. She was quiet for a long moment, something working behind her eyes. Finally, she nodded. You're right. Tomorrow, I'll tell you everything. The good, the bad, the complicated. You deserve that if you're putting yourself at risk for me. After they parted ways, Garrett sat in his truck for a few minutes before starting the engine. What the hell was he doing? He'd promised himself he was out, done, finished with this life, and here he was, getting pulled right back in. But as he drove home through San Diego's afternoon traffic, he couldn't shake the image of Hannah's face during her speech. The fear she'd hidden so well, the determination underneath it. She reminded him of the people he'd spent 8 years protecting, the innocent ones caught in crossfire they didn't create, fighting battles they didn't start. Maybe this was different. Maybe helping one person directly, someone he'd looked in the eye and shared coffee with, was different from the abstract missions he'd run overseas. Maybe he could do this without losing himself. Or maybe he was just lying to himself because it felt good to be needed again. Zoe was waiting by the window when he pulled up, her face lighting up the moment she spotted his truck. By the time he made it up the stairs, she'd already flung the door open and launched herself at him. "You're home. I was worried you wouldn't come back." "I promised, didn't I? I always keep my promises to you." He scooped her up despite his protesting muscles. "What did you and Maria do while I was gone?" "We made cookies, and I drew you a picture, and Maria taught me how to braid my own hair, see?" She pointed to a slightly lopsided but definitely recognizable braid. "That's amazing, Zobair. You're getting so good at new things." Maria appeared in the doorway, wiping flour from her hands. "She's a natural. We made chocolate chip cookies, her favorite. There's a batch for you on the counter." "You're a saint, Maria. What do I owe you?" "Nothing. Just take care of that girl. And yourself." She gave him a meaningful look. "Whatever you decided today, I trust you made the right choice." After she left, Garrett and Zoe settled on the couch with warm cookies and cold milk. This was their ritual. After any kind of stress or difficulty, they'd sit together and just exist in each other's presence. Sarah had started it when Zoe was a baby, and they'd kept it going after her death. "Dad?" Zoe asked, around a mouthful of cookie. "Are you going to help Ms. Clark?" "Yeah, I think I am. For a little while, at least." "Is it dangerous?" He considered lying, but Sarah had always insisted on honesty with their daughter. Age-appropriate honesty, but honesty nonetheless. "It might be, but I'm going to be really careful, and I'm not going to do anything that would take me away from you. You're my first priority, always." Zoe nodded seriously, processing this. Then she snuggled closer to him. "I'm glad you're helping her. She seems nice and sad, like she needs a friend." "She probably does need friends. Being in charge of a big company can be lonely." "You should invite her over for dinner sometime. We could make spaghetti. Everyone likes spaghetti." Garrett smiled, stroking his daughter's hair. "Maybe we will, Zobair. Maybe we will." That night, after Zoe had fallen asleep, Garrett sat on their small balcony, nursing a beer and staring at the San Diego skyline. The city lights glittered like the chandeliers at the gala, beautiful and distant. Somewhere out there, Hannah Clark was in her penthouse, probably unable to sleep, probably running through worst-case scenarios. Somewhere else, men from Volkova Group were regrouping, planning their next move, calculating how to get what they wanted. And here he was, a single dad in a cheap apartment, somehow standing between them. His phone buzzed with an email from Hannah. The subject line read, "Access credentials and background files." Inside were login details for NeuralSync's security systems and encrypted folders containing personnel files, financial records, security assessments. She'd given him the keys to her kingdom without hesitation. Either she was desperate or she trusted him. Maybe both. Garrett opened the files and began to read. If he was doing this, really doing this, he needed to understand what he was protecting and who might want to destroy it. The encryption technology NeuralSync had developed was impressive, even to his limited understanding. It used quantum entanglement principles to create unbreakable codes, making current hacking methods obsolete. No wonder governments and military contractors wanted it. This kind of technology could shift the balance of power in cyber warfare, and if it fell into the wrong hands... He closed his laptop and finished his beer. Tomorrow he'd dive deeper, start the real work. Tonight, he just wanted to sit here and be grateful he was alive. His daughter was safe, and they still had each other. The rest could wait until morning. But as he headed inside to sleep, Garrett couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just stepped onto a path with no clear exit. That helping Hannah Clark wasn't going to be the simple consultation he'd promised himself it would be. That the invisible life he'd built was already crumbling, and there was no going back. He checked on Zoe one more time before bed. She slept peacefully, her coloring book open to a new picture she'd started, a knight protecting a princess from a dragon. The knight had messy brown hair and looked suspiciously like him. "Sleep tight, Zobair," he whispered. "I'll keep you safe. I promise." And he meant it. Whatever happened next, whatever dangers came their way, whatever choices he had to make, Zoe would always come first. She was his mission now, his purpose, his reason for fighting. Everything else was just details. The next 3 weeks blurred together in a pattern Garrett hadn't experienced since his Navy days. Mornings with Zoe, breakfast, getting her ready for school, walking her to the bus stop. Then the drive downtown to Neuralsync's headquarters, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that screamed Silicon Valley money. Afternoons buried in security protocols, personnel files, and digital forensics. Evenings back home for dinner, homework help, bedtime stories. Then late nights on his laptop, following digital breadcrumbs that might lead to whoever was selling Hannah out from the inside. It was exhausting. It was consuming. And if Garrett was honest with himself, some part of him had missed it. Marcus Webb, Hannah's head of security, had been skeptical at first. He was a mountain of a man in his late 40s, with the ramrod posture and suspicious eyes of someone who'd spent 20 years protecting presidents and diplomats. Their first meeting had been tense, circling each other like wolves establishing hierarchy. "So you're the bartender who took down 6 Spetsnaz operators," Marcus had said, arms crossed over his considerable chest. "That's quite a trick." "I got lucky, and they weren't expecting resistance." "Bullshit. I've seen the security footage. That wasn't luck. That was high-level CQB training." "SEAL? Does it matter?" "It matters because Ms. Clark is putting a lot of faith in you, and I need to know if that faith is justified or if you're some washed-up operator trying to relive glory days." Marcus had leaned forward. "So let me be clear. She's my responsibility. I've kept her alive for 2 years through 3 continents and more threats than I can count. You want to help? Great. But you work through me, you clear everything with me, and if I think you're putting her at risk, you're gone. We clear?" Garrett had respected that. Protective instincts, loyalty, clear boundaries, these were things he understood. "Crystal, I'm not here to step on your toes, Marcus. I'm here because I think there's a leak in your organization that you haven't found yet. Someone feeding intelligence to Volkova Group. And I'm here because Ms. Clark asked for help, and I said yes. That's it." Something in his tone must have satisfied Marcus because the other man's posture had relaxed fractionally. "Okay then, show me what you've got." What Garrett had was patterns. Over the next week, he'd isolated 17 employees with unusual financial activity in the past 6 months. Large cash deposits, cryptocurrency transactions, offshore accounts that didn't match their salaries. He'd narrowed it down to 5 with direct access to Hannah's schedule and security protocols. Then 3 who'd taken unexplained trips to Eastern Europe. And finally, one name that made everything click into place. "David Reeves," Garrett had said, spreading printed documents across Marcus's desk. "Senior VP of Operations. Been with the company since year 2. Access to everything. Security systems, executive schedules, board meeting minutes. 3 trips to Prague in the last 4 months, supposedly for vendor meetings. But I checked. The vendors he claimed to meet with have no record of those appointments." Marcus had studied the documents, his expression darkening. "Prague is a known hub for Volkova Group operations. Their European headquarters is there." "Exactly. And look at this." Garrett had pulled up bank records on his laptop. 2 days after each Prague trip, deposits between $50,000 and $75,000 into an account under his wife's maiden name, structured to avoid reporting requirements, but sloppy enough that someone looking would find them. Son of a bitch. Marcus had slammed his hand on the desk. "I've known David for 3 years. Played golf with him. His kid goes to school with my nephew. It's always someone you know. That's how infiltration works." Garrett had kept his voice neutral, understanding the betrayal Marcus was feeling. The question is what we do about it. That conversation had led to this moment, 3 days later, sitting in a surveillance van 2 blocks from David Reeves's suburban home. Hannah was there too, insisting on being present despite both Garrett and Marcus arguing against it. "It's my company, my employee, my responsibility," she'd said with that steel in her voice that Garrett had come to recognize meant arguing was pointless. "If David's been selling me out, I need to hear why." So here they were, watching through long-range cameras as David Reeves pulled into his driveway in a BMW that definitely cost more than his salary justified. He was in his early 40s, handsome in that generic corporate way, wearing a suit that probably came from the same place as Hannah's dress from the gala. The perfect picture of success. The perfect picture of betrayal. "FBI's standing by," Marcus said quietly, monitoring feeds from multiple angles. "We give the word, they move in." "Not yet." Hannah's voice was tight. "I want to talk to him first." "Hannah, that's not a good idea," Garrett said. If he's working with Volkova, he might be dangerous. He's not dangerous. He's David. He brought donuts to board meetings. He coached Little League. But her hands were shaking as she said it. I just need to understand why. They watched David enter his house, lights coming on room by room. His wife was away visiting her mother in Phoenix. They'd confirmed that earlier. The kids were at school. He was alone. Hannah opened the van door before either man could stop her. I'm going to talk to him. You two can wait here or come with me, but I'm doing this. Garrett and Marcus exchanged a look. Then Garrett sighed and checked his concealed carry, a Glock 19 he'd started wearing again, though it felt strange after 3 years. Marcus, you cover the back. I'll stay with Hannah. This is a bad idea, Marcus muttered, but he moved into position. Garrett followed Hannah up the perfectly manicured walkway to David Reeves's perfect suburban home. She rang the doorbell with a steady hand that impressed him, given what she was about to do. David answered wearing casual clothes, surprise flickering across his face when he saw Hannah. Ms. Clark, is everything okay? Can we come in, David? We need to talk. Something in her tone must have warned him because David's expression shifted, became guarded. Of course. Is this about the quarterly projections? I thought those weren't due until... It's not about projections. Hannah walked past him into the house. Garrett followed, positioning himself between them, his hand resting casually near his weapon. It's about Prague and $50,000 deposits, and the fact that you've been selling my company's secrets to a Russian military contractor. The color drained from David's face. For a moment, Garrett thought he might bolt, but then his shoulders slumped and he sank onto his couch like a puppet with cut strings. How did you find out? His voice was barely a whisper. Does it matter? Hannah remained standing, her voice cold in a way Garrett had never heard. What matters is that you betrayed me. You betrayed everyone who trusted you, everyone who worked with you, everyone whose lives you put at risk. Those men at the gala, they could have killed people, David. They almost killed my head of security. They almost killed... Her voice broke slightly, and she looked at Garrett before continuing. They almost killed innocent people. Because of information you provided. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. David's hands were shaking now. You have to believe in me, I never thought it would go that far. Then what did you think would happen? Garrett asked quietly. You give Russian military intelligence access to cutting-edge encryption technology, detailed security protocols, and the personal schedule of a billionaire CEO. What exactly did you think they wanted it for? They said they just wanted to make an offer. A real offer, not the lowball acquisitions we'd been getting. They said if I could help them get a meeting with Hannah, demonstrate the seriousness of their interest, I'd get a finder's fee. That's all. Just facilitate a conversation. A finder's fee of $200,000? Hannah's voice was shaking now, but with anger, not fear. For 3 meetings? David, I've known you for 6 years. You were at my father's funeral. I trusted you with everything. Why? David looked up and Garrett saw something he recognized, desperation born of ordinary human weakness. My son, Lucas, he has leukemia. Rare form, experimental treatment not covered by insurance. $200,000 a round, and he needs 3 rounds. Our savings are gone. We mortgaged the house. My wife's parents gave us everything they had, and it still wasn't enough. The words hung in the air like smoke. Hannah's anger visibly deflated, replaced by something more complicated. Garrett had seen this too many times, good people making terrible choices for understandable reasons. Why didn't you come to me? Hannah asked, her voice softer now. I would have helped. The company has programs for medical emergencies. I couldn't. Don't you see? I couldn't come to you and admit I was failing as a father, that I couldn't save my own son. The pride, the shame, David's voice cracked. And then these men approached me at a conference. They knew about Lucas somehow. They knew everything, his diagnosis, our financial situation, my access at NeuralSync. They made it seem so simple. Just a few pieces of information, just facilitate a conversation. They said no one would get hurt. But people did get hurt, Garrett said. And you didn't stop after that first payment, did you? You kept feeding them information. The gala security details, Ms. Clark's new encryption protocols. How many times, David? I don't know, maybe 6, 7 times over 4 months. But after the gala, I swear I cut them off. I told them I was done, that things had gone too far. That's when they threatened me, said they'd hurt my family if I didn't keep cooperating. Marcus's voice came through the earpiece Garrett wore. FBI just picked up chatter, 3 vehicles approaching from different directions. This might be a setup. Garrett's entire body went on alert. How long? 2 minutes, maybe less. He grabbed Hannah's arm. We need to go, now. What? Why? She looked between him and David, confused. Because Volkova Group knew we'd figure out David was the leak. And they knew we'd come here to confront him. Garrett was already moving toward the door, pulling Hannah with him. This is a trap. David, does your house have a basement? Yes, but I don't. Get down there and don't come out until the FBI arrives. Now, move. The command voice, honed over 8 years of combat operations, made David scramble to obey without question. Garrett pulled Hannah toward the back door where Marcus was waiting. Multiple vehicles inbound. We need alternate extraction. Marcus was already moving, weapon drawn, leading them through David's backyard toward a fence line that backed onto a green belt. FBI's 3 minutes out. We just need to... The explosion cut him off. The front of David's house erupted in flame and debris, the shockwave knocking all 3 of them to the ground. Garrett's ears rang, his vision swam, but training took over. He dragged Hannah to her feet, checked her for injuries. You okay? Hannah, talk to me. I'm okay, I think. What was that? She was bleeding from a cut on her forehead, probably from flying debris, but otherwise seemed intact. Car bomb or RPG? Marcus was already at the fence, helping them over. Definitely an RPG. These bastards brought military ordnance into a residential neighborhood. They dropped into the greenbelt just as automatic weapons fire tore through the space they'd occupied seconds before. Garrett pulled Hannah behind a concrete drainage channel, his body covering hers, his Glock in his hand. Marcus returned fire, disciplined 3-round bursts designed to suppress rather than engage. How many? Garrett called out. At least 6, spread across 3 positions. Professional formation. These aren't thugs, these are Spetsnaz operators, yeah, I know. Garrett's mind was racing through options, none of them good. They were pinned down, outgunned, with a civilian to protect and back up still minutes away. The drainage channel provided cover but no escape route. Behind them was open greenbelt, no concealment. Ahead was the burning house and armed hostiles. Hannah was hyperventilating beside him, the reality of their situation crashing down. David? Oh God, David was in that house. Is he... Basement would have protected him from the initial blast, Garrett said, though he wasn't entirely sure. Focus on breathing, in through your nose, out through your mouth. You're okay. I've got you. More gunfire, closer now. The attackers were advancing, using suppressing fire to cover their movement. Standard small unit tactics. They'd be on top of their position in less than a minute. Marcus reloaded, his face grim. I can hold them for maybe 30 seconds. You get her out of here. I'm not leaving you to... That's not a request, Flynn. It's an order. Your job is to protect her. Mine is to give you the time to do it. Marcus looked at Hannah, his expression softening slightly. It's been an honor, Ms. Clark. Marcus, no. But Garrett was already pulling her away, using the drainage channel for cover, moving low and fast toward a cluster of trees 50 yards away. Behind them, Marcus opened up with sustained fire, buying them seconds with his life. They made the tree line as sirens finally wailed in the distance. Garrett pushed Hannah down behind an old oak, checking their surroundings for additional threats. His heart hammered against his ribs, adrenaline singing through his system. Stay down. Don't move unless I tell you to move. Garrett, we have to help Marcus. We can't just... The explosion that cut her off was smaller than the first, but no less devastating. Some kind of grenade, Garrett's mind cataloged distantly. Marcus's firing position disappeared in smoke and flame. Hannah screamed, or maybe she didn't, or maybe Garrett just couldn't hear it over the ringing in his ears. His hands were shaking, PTSD response. He recognized it clinically, but he forced them steady, forced himself to focus. Marcus was gone. David was probably gone. But Hannah was alive, and keeping her that way was the only thing that mattered right now. The attackers were pulling back, retreating before law enforcement arrived. Smart. They'd accomplished their objective, eliminated the leak before he could talk to authorities, sent a message that Volkova Group could strike anywhere, anytime, and they'd nearly killed Hannah in the process, would have killed her, if not for Marcus's sacrifice. The FBI arrived in force 2 minutes later, flooding the area with agents and tactical units. Garrett kept Hannah behind the tree, kept his weapon visible but pointed down, made no sudden movements. The last thing they needed was friendly fire from amped-up federal agents. Agent Chen found them 10 minutes later, her face pale as she took in the burning house, the carnage, the shell-shocked CEO huddled behind a tree with a former SEAL standing guard. "Jesus Christ, are you hurt?" "We're okay," Garrett said. Marcus Webb, Hannah's head of security, he was covering our extraction. He didn't make it. And David Reeves, the leak we identified, he was in the house when it exploded. "Basement," Hannah said suddenly, her voice hoarse. "David went to the basement. You have to check the basement." 2 hours later, sitting in an FBI mobile command center 3 blocks away, they got confirmation. David Reeves had survived, barely. He was being airlifted to UCSD Medical Center with severe burns and a collapsed lung, but he was alive. He'd also given a preliminary statement identifying his handlers, providing phone numbers and meeting locations, and enough intelligence to keep the FBI busy for months. Marcus Webb's body had been recovered. The grenade had killed him instantly. At least there was that mercy. Hannah sat wrapped in a shock blanket, staring at nothing. They'd treated the cut on her forehead, checked her vitals, offered her water she didn't drink. Garrett sat beside her, his own hands finally steady, his mind running through everything they could have done differently. "I killed him," Hannah said quietly. "Marcus is dead because of me." "No. Marcus is dead because he chose to protect you. That's what he signed up for, what he believed in. Honor his choice by not diminishing it with guilt." Garrett's voice was gentle but firm. "I know it hurts. I know you want to blame yourself. But the only people responsible for Marcus's death are the men who threw that grenade." "How do you do it?" She turned to look at him, her eyes red from tears and smoke. "How do you live with this? The violence, the death, the constant danger? How did you do it for 8 years?" "Poorly. I compartmentalized, told myself it was necessary, that the mission justified the cost. I locked it all away in boxes and tried not to think about it." He paused. "And then my wife died, and all those boxes broke open at once, and I realized I'd been lying to myself about being okay. So I walked away before it destroyed what was left of me. Maybe I should do the same. Walk away. Sell the company, give Volkova what they want, disappear. Is that what you want?" Hannah was quiet for a long time. Then she shook her head slowly. "No. But I don't want more people dying for me either. Marcus had a family, a wife and 2 kids. They'll grow up without a father because I was too stubborn to go into protective custody, too proud to back down. Or they'll grow up knowing their father died protecting someone who was trying to make the world better, that he stood between innocent people and evil, and he didn't flinch." Garrett leaned forward. "I won't lie to you, Hannah. This is only going to get worse. Volkova doesn't quit. They'll keep coming, keep escalating, until they get what they want or we stop them. And stopping them will require things that might keep you up at night." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we can't keep playing defense. They're too well-funded, too connected, too ruthless. If we want to end this, we need to go on offense. Find who's paying Volkova, cut off their funding, eliminate their resources. Make it too expensive to keep coming after you." "You mean kill people?" Garrett met her eyes. "I mean neutralize threats using whatever means necessary. Sometimes that's legal channels. Sometimes it's not. The question is whether you can live with that." "I don't know." Hannah's voice was barely a whisper. "A month ago, I was a CEO worried about quarterly earnings and product launches. Now I'm sitting in an FBI command center talking about killing people. How did my life become this?" "It became this the moment you created something valuable enough to threaten powerful interests. Welcome to the big leagues." He said it without irony or humor. "But you don't have to fight. You can walk away, like you said. Sell to the highest bidder, take your billions, disappear into comfortable obscurity. No one would blame you." "Would you?" The question caught him off guard. "Would I what?" "Would you blame me? If I quit, If I let them win because I was too scared to keep fighting. Garrett thought about that, really thought about it. Thought about Sarah and the promise he'd made to her. Thought about Zoe and the kind of world he wanted her to grow up in. Thought about men like Marcus who died protecting principles they believed in. No, he said finally. I wouldn't blame you. Fear is natural human. Self-preservation is hardwired into us. Walking away doesn't make you weak. It makes you smart enough to know when you're outmatched. Hannah nodded slowly, processing this. Then she did something that surprised him. She laughed, short, bitter, but genuine. You know what the funny thing is? I left MIT with nothing but code on a laptop and an idea that encryption could be democratized. I built Neural Sync in my dorm room, funded by student loans and credit cards. My investors told me I was crazy, that I'd never compete against established players, that I should sell out to Google or Microsoft while I still could. She looked at Garrett with something fierce in her eyes. I didn't build this company to be smart or safe. I built it because I believe people deserve privacy, deserve protection from governments and corporations that treat personal data as a commodity. So no, I'm not walking away. Not now. Not ever. There was the steel Garrett had first seen at the gala, under the fear and practiced smiles. This was the woman who'd built an empire from nothing, who'd stared down boardrooms full of men twice her age and won. Okay then, he said simply. Then we fight. But we do it smart, and we do it my way. No more public appearances without advanced planning. No more predictable routines. You essentially go dark while we figure out who's pulling Volkova's strings. What about my company? I have responsibilities, employees counting on me. Your company will survive a few weeks of remote management better than it'll survive you being kidnapped or killed. We use this time to investigate, to follow the money trail, to identify vulnerabilities in Volkova's operations. And when we find an opening, he didn't finish, didn't need to. Agent Chen returned before Hannah could respond. We've got teams sweeping the area for evidence, but it looks like the attack squad evacuated before we arrived. Professional, coordinated, exactly what we'd expect from Volkova Group. She sat down across from them, her expression grave. I'm going to be honest with you both. This is escalating beyond what the FBI can effectively manage. These people brought military explosives into an American suburb in broad daylight. They executed a coordinated assault that killed a federal witness and a security professional. This is approaching terrorism, and that means bigger agencies getting involved. How long until those bigger agencies actually do something? Garrett asked. Days, maybe weeks. Interagency coordination isn't fast. Chen looked at Hannah. Which is why I'm going to say something off the record. You need protection that federal resources can't provide. Professional protection, by professionals who operate in the same gray areas as Volkova Group. You're suggesting private military contractors, Garrett said. I'm suggesting that sometimes the best defense against a shadow threat is another shadow. I can't officially endorse that recommendation. But off the record? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. After Chen left to coordinate with her teams, Garrett and Hannah sat in silence for a while. The command center bustled around them with controlled chaos, agents on phones, computers displaying surveillance feeds, tactical teams deploying to secure perimeters. The machinery of federal law enforcement grinding forward at its own pace, too slow to keep Hannah alive. I need to check on Zoe, Garrett said finally. Maria's had her all day, and after what happened, of course, go, be with your daughter. Hannah touched his arm briefly. Thank you, Garrett, for protecting me, for not leaving me when things got bad. I gave you my word. I don't break promises. He stood, his body reminding him of every impact, every dive, every second of adrenaline-fueled combat. I'll call you tomorrow. We'll figure out next steps. But as he walked to his truck, Garrett's phone rang with an unknown number. His instincts screamed, "Don't answer," but something made him pick up anyway. Mr. Flynn? The voice was accented, Russian, cultured. I hope I'm not interrupting your evening. Every muscle in Garrett's body tensed. Who is this? Someone who appreciates your skills. The work you did at the gala was impressive. The work you did today, protecting Ms. Clark, even more so. You are clearly a man of exceptional talent. Get to the point. The point is simple. You are on the wrong side of this conflict. Ms. Clark's technology belongs to people who understand its value, who can use it for purposes beyond simple corporate profit. She is an obstacle. You are protecting an obstacle. And you're offering me what? Money to walk away? Threats if I don't? The man laughed, genuinely amused. Neither. I'm offering you a courtesy, advance warning. What happened today was a message. The next message will be more direct. Tell me, Mr. Flynn, does your daughter still attend Lincoln Elementary School? Does she still get picked up by Maria Rodriguez most afternoons at 3:15? Garrett's blood turned to ice. His hand tightened on the phone so hard the case creaked. If you go anywhere near my daughter, then you understand the situation. Walk away. Convince Ms. Clark to accept a reasonable offer for her technology. And your daughter continues her normal life, never knowing how close she came to becoming collateral damage. The voice hardened. Refuse, and I cannot guarantee her safety. These things happen in war, Mr. Flynn. You of all people know that. The line went dead. For several seconds, Garrett stood frozen in the parking lot, his mind spiraling through implications and threats and worst-case scenarios. They knew about Zoe. They knew her school, her schedule, her routine. They were threatening his daughter, the one line he told himself could never be crossed. He was in his truck and driving before conscious thought caught up with action. Every traffic light felt like an eternity. Every car around him could be a threat. By the time he pulled up to his apartment complex, his heart was hammering and cold sweat soaked his shirt. Maria answered on the first ring. Garrett, is everything okay? Is Zoe with you? Is she safe? Yes, of course. She's right here. We were just finishing dinner. What's wrong? Nothing. Maybe. I don't know. He was taking stairs 3 at a time now. I'll be there in 30 seconds. He burst through Maria's apartment door to find Zoe at the kitchen table with a plate of pasta, looking startled by his sudden appearance. Dad? What's wrong? You look scared. Garrett crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into a hug so tight she squeaked. His daughter, his entire world, safe in his arms. He tried to get his breathing under control, tried to push down the panic threatening to overwhelm him. Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. I just missed you. But over Zoe's head he met Maria's eyes, and she understood. Understood that something had changed, that the danger they'd been dancing around had just become directly personal. After some reassurance and a promise to make pancakes in the morning, Garrett got Zoe back to their own apartment and settled into bed. He checked every window lock 3 times, verified the door chain, positioned furniture to create noise barriers that would wake him if someone tried to enter. Then he sat on the couch in the dark with his Glock on his lap and stared at his phone. The encrypted number he'd called twice in 3 years, each time swearing it would be the last. The number of someone who operated in exactly the shadows Agent Chen had described. Jake Morrison, his teammate from SEAL Team 6, the one he'd pulled out of that compound in Helmand Province. The one who'd left the Navy the same year as Garrett, but had gone in a very different direction. Private military work, corporate security, the kind of operations that didn't officially exist. The kind of operations that might be necessary now. Garrett dialed before he could talk himself out of it. Jake answered on the second ring, his voice gravelly with sleep. Flynn, Jesus, man, what time is it? They threatened Zoe, Volkova Group. They threatened my daughter. A pause. Then Jake's voice came back hard and focused, all trace of sleep gone. Tell me everything. So Garrett did. The gala, Hannah Clark, the investigation, today's attack, and finally the phone call. Jake listened without interruption, processing information the way he'd processed tactical briefings in their Navy days. Okay, Jake said when Garrett finished. First thing, Zoe goes into protection. I've got a safe house in Escondido, totally off-grid, staffed by people I trust with my life. You get her there tonight, she stays there until this is resolved. Jake, I can't just uproot her life, take her out of school. You can and you will, because the alternative is finding out too late that Volkova wasn't bluffing. These people don't make empty threats, brother. You know that. Jake's voice softened slightly. Look, I know this isn't what you want, but it's what you need. Get Zoe somewhere safe, then you and I figure out how to end this permanently. I walked away, Jake. I left that life behind. Yeah, and that life just showed up at your daughter's school. So you've got 2 choices. Run and hide and hope they don't find you, or stand and fight on your terms instead of theirs. What's it gonna be? Garrett looked toward Zoe's bedroom, where his daughter slept peacefully, still innocent despite everything she'd seen. What kind of father would he be if he let pride or fear stop him from protecting her? What would Sarah say if he gambled with their daughter's life because he was too stubborn to ask for help? I need to talk to Zoe first, explain things so she understands. Fair enough, but make it fast, Garrett. Clock's ticking. After hanging up, Garrett sat in the darkness for a long time, his Glock heavy in his hands. Everything had changed. What had started as a simple consultation, helping someone who'd been in danger, had escalated into something personal, something that threatened the only thing in his life that truly mattered. Tomorrow, he'd move Zoe to safety. Then he'd have a conversation with Hannah Clark about what came next. Because Agent Chen had been right, plain defense wasn't working. Volkova Group had too many resources, too much reach, too little regard for collateral damage. It was time to stop reacting and start acting. Time to take the fight to them instead of waiting for the next attack. Time to remind these people why messing with Navy SEALs and the people they protect was a really bad idea. But tonight, he just sat guard over his daughter's sleep, his weapon ready, his senses alert, doing what fathers had done since the dawn of time, standing watch against the darkness that threatened his child, and making a promise to that darkness that if it came for her, it would have to go through him first. Morning came too fast and not fast enough. Garrett had dozed in intervals, never truly sleeping, his body jerking awake at every sound from the parking lot 3 stories below. By the time gray light filtered through the curtains, he'd rehearsed the conversation with Zoe 100 times in his head. None of the versions felt adequate. She found him in the kitchen at 6:30, already dressed in her favorite unicorn pajamas, her blonde hair a mess of bedhead that made his heart ache with protective love. "You didn't sleep," she said with the matter-of-fact observation of children who notice everything. "You have dark circles like when Mom was sick." Garrett set down the coffee he'd been nursing and opened his arms. She climbed into his lap, still small enough to fit perfectly there, and he held her close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "Zoe, we need to talk about something important. Are the bad people coming back?" No fear in her voice, just curiosity. How had his 8-year-old become so brave? "Maybe. Probably. Which is why I need you to go somewhere safe for a little while." She pulled back to look at him, those blue eyes, Sarah's eyes, searching his face. "Away from you?" "Just for a bit. My friend Jake has a place where you can stay, with people who will keep you safe. It's like a vacation house, except it's not a vacation. It's hiding." She wasn't crying, but her lower lip trembled. "Because those men might try to hurt me to get to you." Christ, she was too smart for her own good. Something like that, yeah. "What about school, and Maria, and my art class on Thursdays?" "We'll figure all that out. Maybe Jake's people can arrange remote learning for a while. You can still do your art. Bring all your supplies." He was grasping at straws, trying to make this sound less terrifying than it was. "I promise it won't be forever, Zobair. Just until we make sure everything's safe." Zoe was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on his t-shirt. When she spoke, her voice was small but steady. Mom used to say that sometimes we have to do hard things because they're the right things. Is this a hard right thing? "Yeah, sweetheart, it is." "Okay." She nodded, then looked up at him with sudden fierceness. "But you have to promise me something. Anything. Promise you'll be safe too. Promise you won't do something brave and stupid and not come back." Her voice cracked on the last word. "I already lost Mom. I can't lose you too, Dad. I can't." Garrett felt his throat close up, felt tears burning behind his eyes that he refused to let fall. He pulled her close again, pressing his face into her hair. "I promise. I will be so careful, and I will come back to you. Always. That's not negotiable." They spent the next hour packing her things. Clothes, toiletries, her favorite stuffed dolphin named Splash, every coloring book and art supply she owned. Garrett let her pack her own bag, watching as she carefully selected items that mattered. The photo of Sarah from her nightstand, a bracelet Maria had given her, a rock she'd found at the beach that was perfectly smooth. By 8 a.m., Jake pulled up in a black SUV with tinted windows. He looked exactly like Garrett remembered. 6'2", built like a linebacker, with sandy hair going gray at the temples and eyes that had seen too much. They embraced briefly, the kind of hug that spoke of shared history and mutual respect. Hey, brother, wish it was under better circumstances. You and me both. Garrett turned to where Zoe stood on the sidewalk, clutching her backpack and looking uncertainly at this stranger. Zoe, this is Jake. He's one of the best men I know. He's going to make sure you're safe. Jake crouched down to Zoe's level, his expression softening in a way that surprised Garrett. Hey there, kiddo. Your dad told me you like to draw. That's pretty cool. My daughter Emma loves art too. She's about your age. Maybe you two can video chat while you're at the house. You have a daughter? Zoe's posture relaxed slightly. 2 daughters, actually. Emma's 8 and Sophie's 6. They're staying with their mom this week, but they love showing off their artwork to anyone who will look. He grinned. Fair warning, they're very competitive about who's the better artist. I'm pretty good at drawing sea creatures, Zoe said with the beginnings of a smile. Then you'll fit right in. Sophie's obsessed with octopuses. Jake stood, looked at Garrett. The house is locked down tight. Security team of 4, all former operators I've worked with for years. Cameras on every approach. Safe room in the basement, and enough supplies to hold out for a month if necessary. She'll be safe, Garrett. I give you my word. Garrett nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He knelt down and hugged Zoe one more time, memorizing the feeling of her small arms around his neck. I love you, Zoe Bear, more than anything in the world. Love you too, Dad. Be safe. I promise. Watching Jake's SUV disappear around the corner was one of the hardest things Garrett had ever done. Harder than deployments, harder than firefights, harder than standing at Sarah's grave. Because this time, he was sending his daughter away not knowing when he'd see her again. Maria appeared beside him, tissues in hand. She's strong, like her father, like her mother. She squeezed his arm. Now go do what you need to do to bring her home. Hannah was waiting at Neuralink headquarters when Garrett arrived an hour later. The building felt different now, less like a symbol of Silicon Valley success and more like a fortress under siege. Armed security at every entrance, badge scanners that probably cross-referenced with half a dozen databases, and enough cameras to make casino managers jealous. She looked like she hadn't slept either, wearing jeans and a simple black sweater instead of her usual CEO armor. No makeup to hide the dark circles under her eyes or the exhaustion written in every line of her face. How's Zoe? She asked immediately. Safe. I got her out this morning. Garrett accepted the coffee she offered, but didn't drink it. They threatened her, Hannah. Volkova Group called me last night and threatened my 8-year-old daughter. Hannah's face went pale. Oh my God. Garrett, I'm so sorry. I never meant for... If I'd known this would put your family at risk. Stop. This isn't your fault. He set the coffee down, faced her directly. But it does change things. We can't keep playing by rules that don't exist. Volkova Group has shown they'll target civilians, including children, which means we need to end this permanently before anyone else gets hurt. How do we do that? We find out who's paying them and why. Follow the money, identify the client, eliminate their motivation for coming after you. Garrett pulled out his phone, brought up the research he'd compiled at 3 a.m. when sleep wouldn't come. Volkova Group is expensive. 6 Spetsnaz operators, military-grade explosives, sustained operations over months. Someone's bankrolling this to the tune of several $1 million. That's not casual money. That's strategic investment. Hannah moved to her computer, pulled up files. I've been thinking about that. Neuralink's encryption technology has 3 main applications. Consumer privacy, that's our public face. Corporate security, that's where most of our revenue comes from. And military applications, that's what the defense contract covers. Which one would be worth killing for? All of them, potentially. But the military application is the most valuable because it makes current cyber warfare techniques obsolete. If an adversarial nation got their hands on our protocols, she didn't need to finish. So we're looking at state-sponsored industrial espionage. Garrett processed this. Which means Volkova isn't the real enemy. They're just contractors. The real enemy is whoever hired them. How do we find that out? We ask them. Garrett's smile was cold. Jake has connections in the private security world. People who track these organizations, who know how they operate. We identify Volkova's command structure. Find someone mid-level who knows who's signing the checks, and we have a conversation. By conversation, I mean exactly what you think I mean. These people tried to kill you multiple times. They killed Marcus. They threatened my daughter. I'm done being nice about this, Hannah. The question is whether you are too. She looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. When she spoke, her voice was harder than he'd ever heard it. Marcus had a wife and 2 kids. I went to see them yesterday, tried to apologize, tried to explain. His wife, Laura, she just looked at me and said, "Make it mean something. Don't let him die for nothing." So yes, Garrett, I'm done being nice. Tell me what you need. What he needed arrived 4 hours later in the form of Jake and 2 other men Garrett recognized from his SEAL days. Carlos Mendez, a communications specialist who could hack anything with a wireless signal, and Thomas Wright, a sniper who'd once held a position for 72 hours in 100-degree heat waiting for a single shot. They gathered in Hannah's private conference room, the kind with soundproofing and signal jammers to prevent eavesdropping. Hannah had cleared the entire floor, sent her staff home early, leaving just the 6 of them. "Okay," Jake said, spreading maps and documents across the table. "Here's what we know. Volkova Group operates out of Prague as their European hub, but they have assets all over the world. The San Diego operations are being run by a guy named Viktor Sokolov, former GRU, moved into private sector about 5 years ago. He's smart, careful, and very good at his job." "Where is he?" Garrett asked. "That's the interesting part. After yesterday's clusterfuck, he didn't run back to Prague like we'd expect. He went to ground locally, which suggests he's planning another attempt soon." Jake pulled up surveillance photos on his laptop. "We've been tracking his known associates, cross-referencing hotel records, burner phone purchases. Carlos?" Carlos took over, his fingers flying across a keyboard. "Sokolov's using a safe house in Carlsbad, registered to a shell corporation that traces back to, wait for it, a Chinese manufacturing firm with suspected ties to their Ministry of State Security." The pieces clicked into place in Garrett's mind. China. They want the encryption technology to counter American cyber capabilities. "Makes sense," Thomas said in his quiet way. "The defense contract Ms. Clark signed would give the U.S. a significant advantage in cyber warfare. China would pay big money to either acquire that technology or ensure it never gets deployed." Hannah was processing this, her business mind working through implications. "If we can prove Chinese government involvement, we can take this to the State Department, make it a diplomatic issue instead of just corporate espionage." "That's one approach," Jake agreed. "The slow, official, by-the-book approach that might work in 6 months if you survive that long." "What's the other approach?" Hannah asked, though Garrett suspected she already knew. "We grab Sokolov. Tonight. Get him to confirm Chinese involvement and identify his handlers. Then we use that information as leverage. Tell China their operation is blown, and continuing will result in international embarrassment. They'll pull the plug on Volkova's contract, and without funding, the threat ends." "That's kidnapping. That's illegal." But Hannah didn't sound shocked, just thoughtful. "Yes and no," Carlos said. "Technically, it's extraordinary rendition, which is only illegal if you get caught. We extract Sokolov, have a conversation somewhere private, get what we need, and return him to his hotel room with a splitting headache and no clear memory of the past 12 hours. Happens all the time in this business." Garrett watched Hannah process this, watched her weigh ethics against survival. He'd seen this calculation before, in commanders deciding whether to authorize strikes that might kill civilians to take out high-value targets. There were no good choices in war, just less bad ones. "How dangerous is this operation?" Hannah asked. "For you, for Garrett, for everyone involved?" "Very," Jake said honestly. "Sokolov's a trained operator with at least 3 other Spetsnaz soldiers in the house. We'll have surprise and superior planning, but things can go wrong. They often do." "Then I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not," Garrett said immediately. "Hannah, this is exactly the kind of situation you need to avoid. You're the target, putting you in proximity to... He's doing this because of me. Marcus died because of me. Your daughter is in hiding because of me." Her voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "I'm not asking permission, Garrett. I'm telling you, I'm coming. I need to look this man in the eye. I need to hear from his own mouth who wants me dead and why. I've earned that much." Jake and the others looked at Garrett, letting him make the call. He wanted to argue, wanted to forbid it, wanted to keep Hannah safe in her tower while men like him did the dirty work. But he recognized the look in her eyes. The same determination he'd seen when she'd refused protective custody, when she'd insisted on confronting David Reeves. "You stay in the vehicle," he said finally. "You don't enter the house. You don't engage. You just observe from a safe distance. And if things go sideways, you do exactly what I tell you without question. Those are my terms." Deal. They spent the rest of the afternoon planning. Carlos hacked into Carlsbad's municipal systems, pulling traffic camera feeds and utility records. The safe house was a rental property in a quiet neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, attached garage, minimal sight lines from neighbors. Sokolov had 4 men with him based on thermal imaging from a high-altitude drone Carlos had somehow acquired. 5 hostiles, close quarters, Thomas mused. Tight. We'll need to move fast, establish dominance before they can organize a defense. Shock and awe, Garrett agreed. Flashbangs through the windows, breaching charge on the front door. Team 1 takes the ground floor while Team 2 secures the second floor. Sokolov will be in the master bedroom. That's where the most secure position is. What about rules of engagement? Carlos asked. Are we going lethal or non-lethal? The question hung in the air. Garrett looked at each man, then at Hannah. This was the line, the point of no return. Once they crossed it, there was no going back to normal life, no pretending they were just civilians trying to stay safe. Minimize casualties, Garrett said finally. But if they point weapons at you, put them down. Our lives are worth more than theirs, and I want everyone going home tonight. As darkness fell over San Diego, they loaded into 2 vehicles, Jake's SUV for the assault team, Hannah's armored sedan driven by Thomas. Garrett rode with Hannah, checking his gear for the dozenth time. Body armor under a black tactical vest, suppressed Glock 19, flashbang grenades, zip ties for restraints, medical kit. The familiar weight of combat equipment felt strange after 3 years of bartending and dad life. Are you scared? Hannah asked quietly as they drove through the city streets. Terrified. I'm always terrified before operations. Anyone who says they're not is lying or stupid. But you do it anyway. Because being scared of the right things keeps you alive. Being scared of everything keeps you paralyzed. He looked at her. You don't have to come, Hannah. You can still back out. Let us handle this. So can you. You already sent Zoe away, kept her safe. You could leave right now, go to that safe house, be with your daughter instead of breaking into a house full of Russian special forces. I could. But then what? Spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder? Teach Zoe that when things get hard, you run? He shook his head. My wife, Sarah. She used to say that courage isn't about being unafraid. It's about being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. So yeah, I'm scared, but I'm doing it anyway. She sounds like she was amazing. She was. Zoe's got her spirit, that fearless compassion that makes you want to help people even when it's difficult. Garrett smiled sadly. Sarah would have liked you, I think. You're both stubborn as hell about doing what you believe is right. They reached the staging area 2 blocks from the target house at 11 p.m. Carlos had killed the streetlights remotely, creating a bubble of darkness that would mask their approach. Through thermal imaging, they confirmed all 5 targets were inside, 2 downstairs, 3 upstairs, including the master bedroom where Sokolov should be. Comms check, Jake said into his throat mic. Everyone confirmed, 5 active operators plus Hannah monitoring from the vehicle. Remember, Garrett said, we need Sokolov alive and conscious. Everyone else is secondary. We breach in 60 seconds. Questions? No one spoke. These men knew their jobs, had done variations of this operation dozens of times. The difference was authorization. They weren't acting under military orders or government sanction. This was private citizens engaging in extraordinary measures against foreign operatives on American soil. Completely illegal. Absolutely necessary. 30 seconds, Jake counted down. Garrett caught Hannah's eyes through the vehicle window. She looked terrified and determined in equal measure, her hands clenched in her lap. He nodded to her, a promise that he'd come back, that this would work, that tomorrow they'd be closer to ending this nightmare. Then it was time to move. They approached the house in tactical formation, Jake and Garrett on point, Carlos and the others covering angles. The night was quiet, just the distant sound of traffic, and someone's television playing through an open window 3 houses down. Ordinary suburban life, completely unaware that violence was about to shatter the peace. Garrett positioned the breaching charge on the front door while Jake and Thomas moved to windows on either side. Carlos took rear security, ensuring no one escaped or reinforcements arrived. 3, Jake whispered into the comm. 2, 1, execute. The world exploded in light and sound. The breaching charge blew the door off its hinges with a concussive boom that rattled windows. Simultaneously, flashbangs crashed through side windows, detonating in strobing bursts of light and ear-splitting noise designed to disorient and disable. Garrett was through the door before the smoke cleared, his weapon up and tracking. 2 men in the living room, both stumbling from the flashbang effects, reaching for weapons they'd never fire. He put 3 suppressed rounds into the first man's center mass, chest shots designed to stop without killing. The man dropped. The second hostile took a shot that went wide, plaster exploding from the ceiling. Garrett adjusted, fired twice, and the man collapsed. "Ground floor secure!" he called into his mic, already moving toward the stairs. Above, he heard Jake engaging targets. The distinctive sound of suppressed gunfire, someone shouting in Russian, a heavy thud as a body hit the floor. Garrett took the stairs 3 at a time, clearing angles as he moved. Master bedroom at the end of the hall, door closed. He could hear movement inside, someone barricading, preparing for a fight. "Sokolov," Garrett shouted in Russian, a language he'd learned during deployments. "You have 5 seconds to open this door before we blow it open. Your men are down. You're alone. Make this easy." The response was a gunshot through the door, the round passing close enough to Garrett's head that he felt the air displacement. "Okay then." Hardway it was. He pulled another breaching charge, smaller this time, just enough to blow the lock, and placed it on the door handle. "Breaching!" he called, giving Jake time to take cover. The explosion was smaller, but no less effective. The door swung inward and Garrett went through low and fast, his weapon tracking for threats. Sokolov stood behind an overturned mattress he'd used as cover, pistol in hand, cold calculation in his eyes. He was in his 40s, fit and hard, with the look of someone who'd killed men before and wouldn't hesitate to do it again. For a frozen moment, they faced each other across 10 feet of space, combat calculus running through both their minds. Who was faster? Who had better position? Who wanted to survive more? "You cannot win this," Sokolov said in accented English. "Even if you kill me, others will come. This contract is too valuable. The client will not stop." "Then let's talk about that client," Garrett said, his weapon never wavering. "Tell me who's paying you, and maybe this ends with you walking out of here." "You think I fear you? I have faced worse than one American soldier playing hero for corporate bitch." Sokolov's smile was cold. "Your daughter, Zoe, yes? She is safe now. But safe is temporary. Safe requires constant vigilance. Can you maintain that vigilance forever?" The mention of Zoe's name sent white-hot rage through Garrett's veins. His finger tightened on the trigger, the desire to end this man nearly overwhelming his control. "Last chance," Garrett said, his voice deadly calm. "Talk, or I put you down and we interrogate whoever survives downstairs." "No one survives downstairs." Sokolov's smile widened. "Your friends are good, but my men were better than you thought. Check your communications, American. Listen to the silence." Ice flooded Garrett's stomach. He keyed his mic. "Jake, sit rep." Static. "Carlos, respond." Nothing. Either his communications had been jammed or the gunshot came from behind him. Garrett dove and rolled, coming up in a crouch as one of the Spetsnaz soldiers he'd shot downstairs appeared in the doorway. The man was bleeding from his chest wounds, swaying but still upright, still armed. Body armor under his shirt had stopped Garrett's rounds. The soldier fired twice. Garrett felt impact against his own armor, blunt force trauma that would leave massive bruises but didn't penetrate. He returned fire, headshot this time, and the man dropped permanently. But the distraction had cost him. When Garrett turned back, Sokolov was gone, through a window leading to a first-floor awning, already dropping to the ground outside. "Damn it!" Garrett sprinted to the window, saw Sokolov running across the backyard toward a fence line. He keyed his mic again. "Thomas?" Target escaping via backyard, heading northeast. Do you have visual? Thomas's calm voice came through, communications working again. Whatever jamming had occurred was over. I have him. Orders? Disable, don't kill. We need him conscious. Copy, taking the shot. The distinctive crack of Thomas's rifle split the night. Through the window, Garrett saw Sokolov stumble mid-stride, his right leg buckling. The shot had hit him in the thigh, painful, debilitating, but not lethal. Garrett vaulted through the window, hitting the ground in a roll and coming up running. Sokolov had made it to the fence but couldn't climb it with his wounded leg. He turned, raising his pistol, but Garrett was already there. A strike to the wrist sent the gun flying. A leg sweep put Sokolov on his back, and a knee to the chest pinned him, while Garrett zip-tied his wrists. Clear, Garrett called into his mic. Target secured. Jake's voice came through, strained but alive. Copy. Ground floor secure. 2 hostiles neutralized. 1 in custody. Everyone okay? They verified the team. Everyone had taken hits against their armor, but no penetrating wounds. The Spetsnaz soldiers had been good, better than the ones at the gala, but surprise and superior tactics had won the day. Carlos appeared with a medical kit, wrapping Sokolov's leg wound to stop the bleeding. He'll live. Might walk with a limp, but he'll live. They moved Sokolov to the SUV where Hannah waited, her face pale in the dome light. When she saw the Russian operative being loaded into the vehicle, something flickered in her expression. Satisfaction, anger, fear, all mixed together. Take us to the warehouse, Garrett told Thomas, who was driving. They'd secured a location earlier, an abandoned industrial building that Carlos had verified was empty and unwatched. Somewhere they could have an extended conversation without interruption. Sokolov said nothing during the drive, his jaw clenched against pain, his eyes calculating odds and scenarios. Garrett recognized the look, a professional assessing his situation, looking for opportunities to escape or turn the tables. The warehouse was exactly what they needed: isolated, concrete walls that would muffle sound, and enough space to set up a proper interrogation area. They dragged Sokolov to a chair bolted to the floor, secured him with additional restraints, and set up portable lights that cast harsh shadows across his face. Hannah stood in the background with Thomas, watching but not participating. This wasn't her world, wasn't something she had training or experience for. Garrett was grateful she had the wisdom to recognize that. Okay, Victor, Jake said, leaning against a support pillar with deceptive casualness. Let's talk about your employer. Who's paying Volkova Group to target Ms. Clark? Sokolov smiled through his pain. I want lawyer. This is America, yes? I have rights. You're a foreign operative conducting espionage and attempted murder on American soil. You have exactly the rights we decide to give you. Garrett pulled up a folding chair, sat down facing the Russian. But let's not make this adversarial. You're a professional. We're professionals. We all know how this works. You give us information, we make your life easier. Simple transaction. And if I refuse? Then we turn you over to the FBI with evidence of your involvement in multiple felonies and you spend the next 20 years in a federal prison. Or, Garrett leaned forward. We keep you here while we systematically dismantle Volkova Group's operations in North America. Without confirmation of who's paying you, we'll assume it's Russian government and act accordingly. That means every Volkova asset in the U.S. gets burned, every operative gets arrested or worse, and your organization loses millions in contracts. How do you think your bosses will react to that? Sokolov's smile faltered slightly. The threat of organizational damage was more effective than personal threats. Men like him could endure personal consequences, but jeopardizing their entire operation was different. I need guarantees, Sokolov said finally. Immunity from prosecution, safe passage out of country, and money, $1 million. Jake laughed. You're in no position to negotiate. Perhaps not, but I'm in position to stay silent, yes? And silence means you get nothing. You kill me, you get nothing. You give me to FBI, I lawyer up, you get nothing. But we make deal. I talk. You get information, we all win. Garrett looked at Hannah, who'd moved closer to hear the conversation. Her nod was almost imperceptible, but clear. She authorized whatever needed to be authorized. 500,000, Garrett countered. Immunity from prosecution related to tonight only, and safe passage to a non-extradition country of your choice. But you tell us everything: employer identity, payment structure, operational plans, and how deep your intelligence penetration goes. Sokolov considered this, doing his own math about survival odds and payout versus risk. Finally, he nodded. Deal. But I want money first. Information first, then we release funds. You don't trust us. We don't trust you. But we both know neither of us wants this to escalate further. Garrett pulled out his phone, opened a recording app. Now talk. Who hired Volkova Group to target Hannah Clark? Chinese Ministry of State Security, specifically Unit 61398, their cyber warfare division. They want neural sync encryption technology to counter American advantage in cyber operations. They approached Volkova 6 months ago with contract: acquire technology by purchase, theft, or coercion. $500,000 initial payment, $5 million upon successful delivery. Do you have proof of this contract? Digital records, yes. Encrypted files on secure server. I give you access credentials. You get all proof you need. Sokolov rattled off a web address and series of passwords. Carlos immediately began verifying them on his laptop. Why kidnapping instead of just hacking her systems? Garrett asked. We try hacking first. Ms. Clark's security is too good. Quantum encryption on all critical systems. Cannot break with conventional methods. So we switch to human acquisition. Get her, get access codes, get technology. Simple. The other attempts on her life, the car accident, the break-in? Not us. Those were earlier, different contractors. Chinese hired several groups. We were most successful. Others failed, got cut from contract. There was professional pride in his voice, twisted as it was. Hannah spoke for the first time, her voice cold. How many more attempts? If we end your contract, who else comes after me? Sokolov looked at her directly for the first time. No others. Chinese put all resources behind Volkova after other groups failed. We were final option. If we fail, they negotiate or walk away. Too much attention now, too much risk of international incident. Confirmed, Carlos said, looking up from his laptop. Files are authentic. Contracts, payment records, communication logs between Volkova leadership and Chinese intelligence handlers. This is slam-dunk proof of state-sponsored industrial espionage. Garrett felt something loosen in his chest. Relief, maybe? Or just the release of sustained tension. They had what they needed. Evidence that would make this a diplomatic issue instead of a personal fight. Evidence that would force China to back down or face serious international consequences. Okay, Garrett said. We're done here. Jake, release the funds to his account. Thomas, prep him for transport to... Where do you want to go, Victor? Argentina. No extradition treaty. Nice beaches. Good wine. Sokolov actually smiled. I retire now, I think. This business is becoming too complicated. Probably wise. Jake was already arranging transport through encrypted channels. We'll have you on a private flight out of Tijuana in 6 hours. From there, you're on your own. After Sokolov was sedated and loaded back into the SUV for transport to the border, after Carlos had made multiple copies of the digital evidence and sent them to encrypted cloud storage, after Thomas had swept the warehouse for any trace evidence of their presence, Garrett finally allowed himself to breathe. They'd done it. Gotten the proof they needed without anyone dying, without crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed. It felt like a miracle, though Garrett knew it was just a combination of luck and skill in roughly equal measure. Hannah stood beside him in the warehouse's loading dock, both of them watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, San Diego stretching out below them, peaceful and oblivious to the night's events. Is it over? She asked quietly. Really over? The immediate threat, yeah. Once we get this evidence to the State Department, China will have to pull back or face massive blowback, and without funding, Volkova Group has no reason to keep coming after you. He paused. But Hannah, you need to understand, you're on their radar now. Chinese intelligence, Russian contractors, probably half a dozen other organizations that would love to get their hands on your technology. You can't ever really go back to normal. I'm not sure I ever was normal, not by most people's standards. She smiled tiredly. Besides, I've gotten used to having you around. I'd miss the constant terror and life-threatening situations. Despite everything, Garrett laughed. You've got a weird sense of humor for someone who spent the night watching an illegal interrogation. It's either laugh or cry, and I'm too tired to cry. She turned to face him fully. Thank you for everything. For saving me at the gala, for protecting me through all of this, for... Her voice caught. For giving up time with your daughter to keep me safe. That's a sacrifice I'll never forget. Zoe's safe, and after today she can come home. That's all that matters. Is it? Hannah stepped closer, and Garrett suddenly became very aware of the minimal space between them. Because I keep thinking about what you said, that your wife told you courage is doing the right thing even when you're terrified. You've been doing that constantly for weeks now. For me, a virtual stranger. You're not a stranger anymore. No, I suppose I'm not. She reached out, her hand finding his. Garrett, I know this is probably terrible timing, and I know you've got complicated feelings about moving on after losing your wife, but I need you to know. His phone rang, shattering the moment. Jake's name on the screen. Garrett answered, his body tensing automatically at the urgency in his friend's voice. Garrett, we've got a problem. The safe house in Escondido. Someone found it. They're moving on Zoe's location right now. The world stopped. Every other concern, every other priority evaporated in an instant. Someone was going after his daughter. How long? Garrett was already running for the vehicle, Hannah keeping pace beside him. Security team says they've got maybe 15 minutes before hostiles arrive. We're mobilizing everyone we can, but it's 40 minutes from your location. You won't make it in time. 20 years of training warred with absolute terror. His daughter was in danger, and he was too far away to protect her. Every instinct screamed at him to drive faster, to bend reality to his will, to somehow be there right now. But he couldn't. The math didn't work. Even if Thomas drove twice the speed limit on empty roads, they'd arrive after the attack began. Jake, tell the security team to activate all protocols. Lock down the house, get Zoe to the safe room, and hold out until we arrive. Whatever it takes. Already done. But Garrett, Jake's voice was grim. The force heading their way is substantial. At least 10 operators, heavy weapons, multiple vehicles. This isn't a snatch and grab. This is an assault. Either China didn't get the memo that Volkova's contract is dead, or Sokolov lied about being the only contractor. Garrett's blood ran cold as understanding hit. That son of a bitch. He sent us on a wild goose chase while a second team went after my daughter. This was the plan all along. Get us focused on Volkova while someone else executes the real operation. What do we do? Garrett looked at Hannah, saw his own horror reflected in her expression. Then he made the hardest decision of his life. We split up. Hannah, Jake, and Carlos take the evidence to the FBI immediately. Get diplomatic pressure on China to call off whatever this is. Thomas and I go to Escondido, provide support to the security team. He was already calculating odds, scenarios, acceptable losses. Even if we don't arrive in time for the initial assault, we can help with defense or extraction. Garrett, Hannah started, no arguments. Getting this evidence to authorities is the only way to end this permanently, and you need to do that while I go get my daughter. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Bring her home safe. That's the plan. Thomas drove like a man possessed, the SUV screaming through pre-dawn streets at speeds that would definitely result in tickets if they were stopped. But Garrett had called in favors, gotten San Diego PD to give them an escort with lights and sirens, cutting through traffic like a hot knife. Still, every minute felt like an hour. Every mile between him and Zoe felt like a chasm he might not cross in time. His phone rang again. The safe house security team leader, a former Delta operator named Rodriguez. We're engaged, Rodriguez said, the sound of gunfire audible in the background. At least 12 hostiles, maybe more. They came in hard and fast. 2 teams simultaneously breached front and rear. We've got them contained to the first floor for now, but they're pushing hard. RPGs took out our primary defensive positions. We're falling back to the safe room. Is Zoe secure? Safe room locked down. She can't hear the fighting. But Flynn... Rodriguez's voice dropped. We can hold for maybe 10 more minutes. After that, they'll either breach the safe room or burn the whole house down. We need extraction or reinforcements. Now. I'm 20 minutes out. Can you hold for 20 minutes? I'll hold for as long as it takes. But you better get here fast, brother. The line went dead. Thomas glanced at Garrett, his expression grim. We're not going to make it in time. Well, then we better figure out a way to bend physics. Garrett pulled up tactical maps on his phone, studying the safe house layout. There's a storm drain system that runs under that neighborhood. Carlos mapped it when he set up the house. If we can access it from a street over, we might be able to come up inside their perimeter. That's insane. Those drains haven't been maintained in years, could be blocked, could be flooded. You have a better idea? Thomas shook his head. Storm drains it is. They arrived at the access point 18 minutes after Rodriguez's call. 18 minutes that might have been 18 years for all Garrett's awareness of time passing. He could hear the battle raging 2 blocks away, sustained gunfire, explosions, men shouting in multiple languages. The storm drain entrance was secured by a rusted grate that they tore free with the SUV's winch. Inside was darkness and the smell of stagnant water and decay. Garrett activated his weapon light, checked his gear one final time. You don't have to come, he told Thomas. This is my daughter, my fight. And Rodriguez is my friend, besides. Thomas chambered a round in his rifle. I've survived worse than urban drainage systems. Let's go get your kid. They moved through the tunnels in tactical formation, water splashing around their boots, rats scattering before their lights. The map on Garrett's phone showed they were getting close, 100 yards, 50, 25. Above them, the sounds of battle intensified. Then, abruptly, they went quiet. Either Rodriguez's team had been overrun, or the attackers were regrouping for a final push. Garrett found the access point Carlos had marked, a maintenance ladder leading up to a basement entrance in the safe house. Locked, but a small breaching charge would handle that. He set the charge, gave Thomas a 3 count, and blew the lock. They came up into chaos. The basement was filled with smoke from flashbangs and burning furniture. 2 of the security team were down but breathing, wounded, not dead. The safe room door at the far end was still secure but showing signs of attempted breach. Scorch marks where they'd tried cutting through with thermite. Impact craters where they'd hit it with battering rams. And standing in front of that door, wounded and swaying but still armed, was Rodriguez. He'd taken what looked like 3 or 4 bullets, his body armor shredded, blood staining his tactical vest. But his rifle was up, his eyes focused. Flynn, he rasped, about damn time. Where are they? Pulled back to regroup. They'll come again in maybe 2 minutes, with heavier explosives this time. Rodriguez coughed, blood on his lips. You need to get her out. There's no holding them off another assault. Garrett moved to the safe room door, entered the override code. The heavy steel swung open to reveal a small reinforced chamber, and his daughter, huddled in the corner with her stuffed dolphin, tears streaming down her face. Dad! She launched herself at him, and he caught her, held her so tight she squeaked. I was so scared. There were loud noises, and Rodriguez said to stay here and not come out no matter what. And, shh, shh. It's okay. I've got you. You're safe now. He checked her quickly. No injuries, just terror. We're going to leave now, okay? But we have to be very quiet and very fast. Can you do that for me? She nodded against his chest. I can be brave. I know you can, Zobair. You're the bravest person I know. Thomas had already secured the basement, positioned to cover their extraction. Garrett moved Rodriguez and the other 2 wounded security personnel toward the storm drain access point. It would be a tight squeeze, getting everyone through, but it was their only option. They were halfway to the tunnel entrance when the assault team returned. The first indication was a flashbang through the basement window. Garrett turned away, shielding Zoe from the worst of the light and sound. His ears rang, his vision swam, but muscle memory kept him moving toward the tunnel. Then they came. 4 men in full tactical gear, weapons up and firing. Thomas returned fire from cover, disciplined bursts that forced them back. But more were coming. Garrett could hear boots on the stairs, multiple hostiles converging on their position. He made a decision. Set Zoe down in the tunnel entrance, looked into her terrified eyes. Listen to me very carefully, sweetheart. You're going to climb down this ladder with Thomas. He'll take you through the tunnel to safety, and I'll be right behind you, I promise. But Dad, no arguments. Go, now. Thomas, get her out of here. Thomas hesitated for only a moment, then nodded. Don't do anything stupid, Flynn. When have I ever? He watched them disappear into the tunnel, his daughter and the sniper climbing down into darkness towards safety. Then Garrett turned back to face the assault team alone. Rodriguez was unconscious now, shock taking him. The other two security personnel were in no shape to fight. It was just Garrett against however many operators were left. The old familiar calm descended. The training that never really left. The combat state where fear evaporated and only tactical calculation remained. He checked his ammunition. 2 magazines left. Maybe 40 rounds total. Not great odds, but he'd worked with worse. A figure appeared at the top of the stairs. Garrett fired twice, center mass. The figure dropped. Another came through the window. Garrett adjusted, fired, watched the man fall. They were coming from multiple angles now, trying to overwhelm him with numbers and firepower. He fell back to a support pillar, using it for cover while he engaged targets. 1 down, 2. His magazine ran dry, and he reloaded smoothly, automatically. 3 more hostiles entered the basement. 4. How many were there? Return fire stitched across the concrete near his head. Garrett ducked, rolled to new cover, came up firing. Another target down. But they were adapting, spreading out, flanking his position. This was it. The math he'd always known might come due. 1 operator against overwhelming numbers. No backup arriving. No miraculous rescue. Just him and his weapon and the grim determination to hold this position long enough for Zoe to escape. For his daughter to live. That was worth anything. Everything. He was changing magazines when pain exploded in his shoulder. He'd been hit. A through and through that would need medical attention he wouldn't get for a while. His left arm went partially numb, making weapon manipulation harder. But he kept firing, kept fighting. Because somewhere in those tunnels, his daughter was running towards safety. And that meant this wasn't over. He hadn't failed yet. Another magazine empty. His last one. 20 rounds between him and empty. He made every shot count, forced the attackers to respect his position, bought seconds that turned into minutes. Then, impossibly, he heard sirens. Multiple sirens, growing louder. And voices shouting in English, federal agents backed by SWAT teams. Hannah and Jake must have gotten through, must have convinced authorities to send immediate response. The assault team heard it too. They began pulling back, abandoning the operation in favor of escape. Garrett slumped against the pillar, his shoulder screaming, his head spinning from blood loss and adrenaline crash. But Zoe was safe. That was all that mattered. His daughter was safe. And he'd kept his promise to bring her home. FBI agents flooded the basement minutes later, securing the scene and calling for medical support. They found Garrett still conscious, still gripping his weapon, his eyes locked on the tunnel entrance where his daughter had disappeared. "Sir, you need to put the weapon down," an agent said carefully. "My daughter," Garrett managed. "In the tunnels. With Thomas Wright. They're friendlies, don't shoot them." "We have them. They're safe. Thomas brought her out 2 blocks away. She's with Child Protective Services right now. Unharmed, just scared." Only then did Garrett lower his weapon. Only then did he let the agents tend to his wounds. Only then did he allow himself to believe it might actually be over. Hannah arrived as they were loading him into an ambulance. She looked frantic, her careful composure completely shattered. "Garrett, oh my God, are you—" "I'm fine. Shoulder wound, nothing critical." He caught her hand. "Zoe?" "Safe. I saw her. She's asking for you, but they won't let her near the scene until it's secured." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "You did it. You kept her safe. You kept your promise." "Did the evidence? FBI has it. State Department has it. We're already getting calls from Chinese embassy trying to negotiate. It's over, Garrett. Really over this time." He wanted to believe her, wanted to let himself relax, to accept that the fight was finally done. But years of combat experience had taught him that nothing was ever truly over. There was always another threat, another enemy, another battle waiting around the corner. Still, for now, in this moment, Zoe was safe. Hannah was safe. And he was alive to fight another day if necessary. That would have to be enough. As the ambulance pulled away, Garrett caught one last glimpse of the safe house. Burning, surrounded by federal agents and emergency vehicles. A monument to violence and sacrifice and the terrible things people did to protect what mattered most. He closed his eyes and thought of Sarah, Hoped that wherever she was, she understood why he'd broken his promise to leave the violence behind. Hoped she'd forgive him for putting their daughter through this terror. But mostly, he hoped that when Zoe looked back on this night years from now, she'd understand that some things were worth fighting for. That courage meant doing the right thing even when every instinct screamed to run. That love sometimes demanded sacrifice. And that her father had loved her enough to face down an army alone just to buy her seconds to escape. Because in the end, that's what being a father meant, standing between your child and the darkness, no matter the cost. Always. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and flowers, an odd combination that reminded Garrett too much of Sarah's final days. He'd been awake for maybe 6 hours after surgery to repair his shoulder, the doctors telling him he was lucky the bullet had missed major arteries and bone. Lucky. That was one word for it. Zoe sat in the chair beside his bed, her small hand wrapped around his good one, refusing to let go even when the nurses came to check his vitals. She'd been silent for the first hour after they'd allowed her into the room, just staring at him with those blue eyes full of questions she didn't know how to ask. "Does it hurt?" she finally whispered, looking at the bandages wrapping his shoulder and upper chest. "A little, but the medicine helps." He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm okay, Zobair. I promise." "You keep making promises and then almost dying." Her voice cracked and tears spilled down her cheeks. "First at the party, then at that house. And I heard the agents talking. They said you fought like 10 men all by yourself so I could escape. Dad, you could have died. You could have left me alone like Mom did." The words hit harder than any bullet. Garrett pulled her closer with his good arm, ignoring the protest from his shoulder. "Hey, look at me. Look at me, sweetheart. I didn't die. I'm right here. And I'm not going anywhere. Not now, not ever, if I can help it. But what if you can't help it? What if next time? There won't be a next time." He said it with absolute conviction, needing her to believe it even as part of him wondered if that was true. "The people who were after us, they're done. It's over. We can go back to normal life, pancakes and homework and coloring books, just you and me." Zoe pulled back slightly, studying his face with that unnerving perceptiveness. "And Miss Clark? What about her? Are you going to keep seeing her because she's been here every day? The nurses said she slept in the waiting room the first night because she was so worried about you." Garrett didn't know how to answer that. Hannah had visited multiple times over the past 3 days, bringing flowers and books and desperate apologies he kept telling her weren't necessary, but there was something else in her visits too, something unspoken that hung between them like a question neither was ready to ask. "Ms. Clark is a friend," he said carefully, "someone I helped, and who helped us. That's all." "Mom would want you to be happy," Zoe said with the simple wisdom of children who understood more than adults gave them credit for. "She told me that before she died. She said you were the best dad in the world, and that someday, when enough time had passed, you should find someone who makes you smile the way she did." The memory of Sarah saying almost exactly those words in her final lucid moments made Garrett's throat tight. "Your mom was pretty smart." "The smartest," Zoe laid her head on his good shoulder. "I miss her every day. But I think maybe she sent Miss Clark to us, like a sign or something." "Maybe she did, sweetheart. Maybe she did." Jake visited that afternoon, bringing news from the outside world that felt simultaneously distant and too close. The diplomatic fallout from the Chinese government's involvement had been swift and severe. Formal apologies, promises of investigation, immediate withdrawal of all Volkova Group contracts. David Reeves had survived his injuries and was cooperating fully with federal authorities in exchange for reduced charges. Rodriguez and his team were recovering, though it would be months of physical therapy before they were back to full capacity. "And Sokolov?" Garrett asked. "On a beach in Argentina, probably sipping caipirinhas and counting his money." Jake shrugged. "Can't say I love that outcome, but he gave us what we needed. And honestly, after everything that went down, having him far away from American soil seems like the best-case scenario." "What about the other contractors? The ones who made the earlier attempts on Hannah?" "FBI's hunting them down systematically. Turns out when you expose state-sponsored espionage, governments get real motivated to clean up loose ends." Jake sat in the chair Zoe had vacated when she'd gone to get snacks from the vending machine. How are you really doing, brother? And I don't mean the shoulder. Garrett was quiet for a moment, trying to assess his own mental state honestly. I don't know. Part of me feels like I should be more traumatized. I just fought through what should have been a suicide mission. But mostly I just feel tired and grateful. Zoe's safe, Hannah's safe, and I'm alive to be here for both of them. That's more than a lot of guys in our line of work can say. You thinking about going back to the work, I mean? You're good at it, Garrett, real good, and there's always demand for operators with your skill set. No. The answer came without hesitation. I did what I had to do to protect my daughter and help someone who needed it. But that doesn't mean I want to make a career out of it again. Zoe needs a father who comes home every night, not one who's constantly deployed to God knows where doing God knows what. Fair enough? Jake stood, clapped him gently on his good shoulder. But if you ever change your mind, you know where to find me. And Garrett, you did good work these past weeks. Sarah would be proud. After Jake left, Garrett lay in the hospital bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about the past month. How quickly his carefully constructed, quiet life had been upended. How easily he'd slipped back into combat mode when circumstances demanded it. How close he'd come to losing everything that mattered. And how, despite all of it, some part of him had felt more alive than he had in 3 years. Hannah visited that evening, arriving with Chinese takeout that she'd somehow convinced the nurses to allow. You looked like you could use real food instead of hospital mystery meat, she said, setting up containers on his rolling table. You're a lifesaver. Garrett tried to sit up straighter and winced at the movement. Hannah immediately moved to help, adjusting his pillows with the kind of natural care that suggested she'd done this before. You don't have to keep coming here, you know. I'm fine, Zoe's fine, and you've got a company to run. Actually, I don't. Not for the next month anyway. She settled into the visitor's chair, picking at her lo mein with chopsticks. I put my CFO in charge of day-to-day operations and took a leave of absence. First vacation I've had in 8 years. Forced vacation hardly counts. No, but necessary vacation does. She looked at him directly, and Garrett saw something vulnerable in her expression. I've spent the past week thinking about what matters, about what I'm willing to sacrifice for success, and I realized I built an empire, but I don't have a life. No close friends, no real relationships, no hobbies beyond work. I was so focused on proving I could compete with tech giants that I forgot to actually live. So what are you going to do about it? I'm not entirely sure yet, but I know I want to make some changes. Maybe step back from active CEO duties, hire someone to handle operations while I focus on research and development, the parts of the business I actually enjoy. Maybe travel a little, see places that aren't just airport hotels between investor meetings. She paused. Maybe spend time with people who remind me there's more to life than quarterly earnings. The implication hung in the air between them. Garrett knew he should probably address it, but he wasn't sure how. His feelings for Hannah were complicated. Gratitude, admiration, attraction, all tangled up with guilt about moving on from Sarah and fear about what any relationship might mean for Zoe's stability. Hannah, I don't. She held up a hand. You don't have to say anything right now. I know this is complicated. I know you're still processing everything that happened, and I know you have Zoe to think about. I'm not asking for anything, Garrett. I just wanted you to know that these past weeks, despite the terror and violence and near-death experiences, she smiled. They've been some of the most meaningful of my life because of you. Because I repeatedly put you in danger? Because you saw me. Not CEO Hannah Clark, not the billionaire tech genius, not the target that needed protecting. Just me, the person underneath all the armor. She set down her chopsticks. Do you know how rare that is? How few people actually look past the surface? I think you're giving me too much credit. I'm just a guy who happened to be bartending the night you needed help. You're so much more than that, and I think part of you knows it. You're just scared to admit it, because admitting it means accepting that maybe you're not done with that life. That maybe there's room in your world for both being Zoe's dad and being the man who runs toward danger when others need help. Before Garrett could respond, Zoe burst back into the room with an armful of candy bars and a grin that suggested she'd charmed the vending machine attendant into giving her extra. Ms. Clark, you're here. Did you bring the wontons? Dad loves wontons. I did indeed, and there's plenty for all of us. Hannah made space for Zoe to join them, and the three of them shared dinner while Zoe chattered about the art project she'd started in the hospital's children's activity room. It felt bizarrely domestic, this makeshift family dinner in a hospital room with plastic utensils and paper plates. It felt right. 2 weeks later, Garrett was cleared to leave the hospital with strict instructions about physical therapy and limited activity. Jake had arranged for temporary security at their apartment, just a precaution while international agencies finished cleaning up the mess. But Garrett suspected it was more about giving him peace of mind than actual threat assessment. Zoe had decorated their apartment with welcome home signs made from construction paper and glitter. Maria had stocked their refrigerator and left a casserole with heating instructions. And there, on the kitchen counter, was an envelope with Hannah's handwriting. Inside was a check for $500,000 and a simple note. For Zoe's college fund, medical bills, and lost wages, non-negotiable. And please call me when you're ready. No pressure, just hope. H. Garrett stared at the check for a long time. $500,000. More money than he'd see in 5 years of bartending. Enough to secure Zoe's future, to buy a real house instead of renting, to maybe even start some kind of security consulting business on his own terms. It was also a reminder of the vast gulf between his world and Hannah's. She could write a check for $500,000 like he'd buy groceries. She lived in a penthouse he'd need a year's salary to afford 1 month's rent on. She operated in circles where people had more power and influence before breakfast than he'd have in a lifetime. What did he possibly have to offer someone like that? Are you going to call her? Zoe asked, appearing at his elbow with her ever-present coloring book. I don't know, Zobear. It's complicated. Adults always say that when they're scared. She climbed onto a kitchen stool, started coloring what looked like a portrait of a woman with dark hair. Mom used to say the best things in life are scary at first. Like when she asked you to marry her. You told me that story, remember? How she proposed to you and you were so surprised you almost said no because you were scared. I wasn't scared. I was just... He stopped, because she was right. He had been terrified. Terrified of being vulnerable, of letting someone in completely, of giving another person the power to hurt him. And then he'd said yes anyway, and it had been the best decision of his life. What are you drawing? He asked, changing the subject. A family portrait. See, that's you, and that's me, and that's Ms. Clark. She pointed to the 3 figures she'd carefully rendered. And that's Splash the dolphin, because every good family has a pet. Garrett's chest tightened looking at the picture. In Zoe's world, it was simple. They'd gone through something terrible together, had survived, and had come out the other side as something new. A family, however unconventional. If only adult complications were as easy to resolve as adding another figure to a crayon drawing. He waited 3 days before calling Hannah, using that time to work through his own tangled feelings. The truth was, he cared about her. More than cared about her. Felt something deeper that terrified him because it was so soon after Sarah, so unexpected, so complicated by everything they'd been through. But Zoe was right. The best things in life were often scary at first. They met at the same coffee shop where they'd first discussed him helping her, coming full circle to where this all began. Hannah arrived early, already seated with 2 coffees. Black for him, something complicated for her, and an uncertain smile. You came. You doubted I would? A little. I wasn't sure after the check if you'd think I was trying to buy your affection or... Hannah, stop. He sat down across from her. The check was generous, incredibly generous, and I'm grateful both for the money and the thought behind it. But that's not why I'm here. Why are you here? Because Zoe drew a picture of you and told me I was being an idiot for not calling, and because my 8-year-old daughter is apparently smarter about relationships than I am. He wrapped his hands around the coffee cup, the warmth grounding. And because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since this all started. Something shifted in Hannah's expression. Hope, relief, maybe both. I haven't stopped thinking about you either, which is inconvenient because I'm supposed to be taking a break from stress and near-death experiences, and you seem to come with both. Only sometimes. Other times I come with pancakes and dad jokes. Terrible pancakes from what Zoe tells me. They're not that bad. They're just rustic, character-building pancakes. They both laughed, and just like that, the tension broke. They spent the next hour talking, Not about Volkova Group or Chinese intelligence or violence, but about normal things. Hannah's plans to restructure her company, maybe step back from daily operations and focus on research. Garrett's thoughts about using his skills to help nonprofits with security consulting, something that felt purposeful without the moral ambiguity of private military work. "What does Zoe think about all this?" Hannah asked. "About you potentially spending time with me, I mean." "She drew you into our family portrait. I'd say she's on board." Garrett paused. "But Hannah, you need to understand, she's my priority. Always. Any relationship I'm in, that person has to understand they're coming into an established family unit. Zoe and I, we're a package deal. I wouldn't want it any other way. Your love for your daughter, the way you do anything to protect her, that's part of what made me fall for you in the first place." She caught herself. "Sorry, that was probably too honest too soon." "No, it's—" Garrett stopped, forcing himself to be equally honest. "It's nice." Hearing that, "I've been so focused on being just a dad for 3 years that I forgot I could be other things too. And maybe, with the right person, those things don't have to be separate. Maybe I can be Zoe's father and also someone's partner. Maybe there's room for both. So what do we do now?" "We take it slow. We spend time together, let Zoe get comfortable with the idea, see if this thing between us is real or just trauma bonding from shared near-death experiences." He smiled. "And we accept that it might not work out, and that's okay too. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people who've been through something terrible together, trying to figure out if they can build something good from it." Hannah reached across the table, her hand covering his. "I can work with that." They started with small steps. Coffee meetings that turned into lunch dates. Family dinners at Garrett's apartment where Hannah learned that he really was terrible at cooking and Zoe was a much better chef at 8 than he was at 35. Museum visits and beach walks and movie nights where they let Zoe pick what to watch and endured more animated princess films than Garrett thought existed. Slowly, carefully, they built something new from the wreckage of what had been. Hannah got to know Zoe beyond crisis situations, discovered her love of marine biology and her ambition to become an artist or a marine biologist, or possibly both. Zoe got to know Hannah beyond the scared CEO who needed protecting, discovered her terrible singing voice, her inexplicable fear of butterflies, and her genuine delight in teaching anyone who'd listen about encryption algorithms. And Garrett got to know Hannah beyond the professional distance they'd maintained during the crisis, discovered she was funny in a dry, subtle way that caught him off guard, that she had a scar on her left hand from a chemistry experiment gone wrong in high school, that she read romance novels and pretended they were business books when in public, that she cried at commercials but kept her composure during billion-dollar negotiations. 6 weeks after the hospital, Garrett woke up one morning and realized he was happy. Not just content or surviving, but genuinely happy. He had his daughter healthy and safe. He had work that felt meaningful. He'd started consulting for 3 nonprofits on security systems, using his skills to protect vulnerable populations. And he had Hannah, who'd somehow slipped into his life, and Zoe's like she'd always belonged there. It was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. "I want to show you something," Hannah said one Saturday afternoon. She'd picked them up in her car, something more modest than the armored sedan from before, just a regular SUV that didn't scream wealth. They drove to an older neighborhood in North Park, stopping in front of a vacant community center that had clearly seen better days. "What is this?" Garrett asked as they got out. "A project I'm considering. The building's been abandoned for 5 years, but the property is structurally sound. I was thinking—" She looked at him uncertainly. "I was thinking about turning it into a community center. Programs for at-risk youth, technology education for underserved communities, support services for military families, and I wanted to know what you thought about naming it after your wife." Garrett felt his throat close up. Beside him, Zoe had gone very still, her hand finding his. "The Sarah Flynn Community Center," Hannah continued softly. "A place that helps people, that builds hope instead of just wealth. I know I can't bring her back, and I know this doesn't make up for what you both went through. But maybe we can honor her memory by creating something that reflects who she was, someone who helped people, who ran toward emergencies instead of away. Can we see inside?" Zoe's voice was small but steady. The interior was dusty and needed work, but Garrett could see the potential. Large open spaces that could become classrooms or art studios. A commercial kitchen that could provide cooking classes or community meals. Offices that could house social services. And in the center, a small memorial garden visible through large windows. A peaceful space for reflection and remembrance. The garden would have a plaque, Hannah explained, dedicated to Sarah and to Marcus and to everyone who's lost someone while protecting others. A reminder that the strong have an obligation to protect the weak and that sacrifice means something. Garrett walked through the space, his mind filling it with possibilities. Kids learning to code, families finding support, veterans connecting with resources they needed. A living legacy instead of just a headstone in a cemetery. "What do you think, Zobair?" he asked his daughter. Zoe stood in the center of what would be the main hall, turning slowly to take it all in. When she looked at him, tears were streaming down her face, but she was smiling. "I think Mom would love it. I think she'd say we were doing a hard right thing." She walked over to Hannah, looked up at her seriously. "Thank you for remembering her, for wanting to make something beautiful." Hannah knelt down to Zoe's level. "Your mom sounds like she was an amazing woman, and you're just like her, brave and kind and so incredibly strong. I'd be honored if you'd help me design this place, make it somewhere she'd be proud of." "Really? I could help?" "Absolutely. Every community center needs good art, and you're the best artist I know." Watching them together, this woman he was falling for and this daughter he'd die for, Garrett felt something shift inside him. Sarah would have liked Hannah, would have approved of how she treated Zoe, how she honored Sarah's memory instead of trying to erase it, how she understood that loving someone who'd lost a spouse meant accepting the ghost that would always be part of the family. "Okay," he said, "let's do it. The Sarah Flynn Community Center, but on one condition. Name it. We do this right. Not just throwing money at the problem, but actually engaging with the community, understanding what they need, building something that lasts." He looked at Hannah seriously. "And you let me help. Security consulting, program development, whatever you need. We build this together." "I'd like that." Hannah stood, moved to stand beside him, their shoulders touching. "We make a good team." "Yeah, we really do." The next 8 months passed in a blur of construction, planning, and what Garrett could only describe as intentional family building. They took Zoe to visit the construction site weekly, watching as the dilapidated building transformed into something beautiful. Hannah involved her in every decision about the art installations, asking her opinion on colors and themes and what kinds of programs kids would actually want. They took trips together, simple weekends away to places like Legoland and the San Diego Zoo, normal family activities that felt remarkably healing. Hannah learned to braid Zoe's hair after watching YouTube tutorials for hours. Garrett learned to appreciate Hannah's obsession with planning everything down to the minute, while she learned to embrace his more spontaneous approach to life. They fought sometimes, usually about stupid things like whose turn it was to do dishes or whether 6:30 or 7 was a reasonable bedtime for an 8-year-old. But they always talked through it, always found compromise, always remembered that they were building something new and it wouldn't be perfect. Jake visited regularly, becoming an honorary uncle to Zoe and a trusted friend to Hannah. He'd left private military work and started his own security consulting firm, occasionally partnering with Garrett on projects that needed their particular skill sets. Thomas and Carlos stayed in touch too, this makeshift family of operators who'd found purpose beyond warfare. And slowly, carefully, Garrett let himself fall in love again. It wasn't the same as with Sarah. Nothing ever would be. Sarah had been his first love, his partner through early adulthood, the mother of his child. That relationship had been built on youth and possibility and the belief that they could conquer anything together. What he had with Hannah was different, built on survival and mutual respect and the understanding that they'd both seen darkness and chosen light anyway. Built on Zoe's needs and careful boundaries and the kind of patience that only came from knowing how easily everything could be lost. It was messier, more complicated, and absolutely real. The Sarah Flynn Community Center opened on a Saturday in late October, 15 months after that terrible night at the gala. The weather was perfect. San Diego sunshine and 75 degrees, the kind of day that reminded Garrett why he'd never left this city, despite all its painful memories. Over 300 people attended the opening ceremony. Families from the neighborhood, kids who'd already enrolled in the after-school programs, veterans from the support groups that would meet there weekly. Local politicians gave speeches about community investment and public-private partnerships. News cameras captured footage for the evening broadcast. But Garrett only cared about 3 people in the crowd. Zoe stood on the stage in a dress she'd picked out herself, ready to unveil the memorial plaque she'd helped design. She'd grown over the past year, taller, more confident, still processing trauma, but learning to live with it rather than be defined by it. Her therapist said she was doing remarkably well, considering everything she'd witnessed. Garrett thought she was doing remarkably well because she was Sarah's daughter, resilient and compassionate and stronger than she knew. Hannah stood beside him, her hand in his, wearing a simple blue dress that matched her eyes. She'd stepped down as CEO of NeuralSync 3 months earlier, transitioning to Chief Technology Officer and allowing someone else to handle the operational stress. She still worked hard, still pushed for innovation in encryption and privacy protection, but she also took weekends off and learned to say no to meetings that didn't matter. She'd learned to live instead of just work. And there, in the front row of seats, was an empty chair with a single white rose on it, Sarah's chair. Because even in building something new, they honored what had been. Even in moving forward, they carried the past with them. "Thank you all for being here today," Garrett said when it was his turn to speak. He'd written and rewritten these words a dozen times, never feeling like they captured everything he wanted to say. 15 months ago, my daughter and I were living a quiet life. I was working as a bartender, trying to be invisible, trying to protect her from a world that seemed too dangerous. And then something happened that changed everything. I met someone who needed help. And in helping her, I remembered something my wife Sarah used to tell me, that we have an obligation to use whatever gifts we have to protect people who can't protect themselves. He looked at Hannah, who smiled encouragement. This community center exists because of that belief. Because Hannah Clark decided that wealth should build hope, not just profit. Because Marcus Webb gave his life protecting someone who was trying to make the world better. Because David Reeves made terrible choices for understandable reasons, and we all deserve second chances. And because my wife Sarah, who I lost 3 years ago, spent her life running toward emergencies instead of away from them. Garrett's voice caught, and he took a moment to compose himself. Sarah was an ER nurse. She worked double shifts, treated people regardless of their ability to pay, and believed that healthcare was a human right. She died too young, but she lived fully. And I hope, this place captures her spirit. A space where people can find help without judgment, where kids can learn and grow, where veterans can connect and heal, where we remember that the strong have an obligation to protect the weak. He stepped back and Zoe came forward to pull the cloth off the memorial plaque. It was beautiful, bronze with Sarah's name and dates, Marcus Webb's name below, and a quote Zoe had insisted on, "Courage is doing the right thing even when you're terrified." The crowd applauded, and several people were openly crying. Garrett felt tears on his own cheeks, but didn't bother wiping them away. This was a day for tears and joy, for remembering loss and celebrating hope. After the ceremony, as people toured the facility and kids excitedly explored the art studio and computer labs, Hannah found Garrett in the memorial garden. He was standing in front of Sarah's plaque, his fingers tracing her name. "You okay?" Hannah asked softly. "Yeah, just talking to her, telling her about all this, about you and Zoe, about how we're doing." He turned to face her. "Is that weird, that I still talk to her sometimes?" "Not weird at all. Love doesn't end just because someone dies. It transforms, becomes something else, but it doesn't disappear." Hannah slipped her hand into his. "I hope she knows I'm taking good care of you both, that I love her daughter like she was my own, that I'm grateful every day for the family you've let me join. She knows, and she approves, I think. Zoe says she visits her dreams sometimes, and Sarah always tells her that we're doing good, that she's proud of us. Smart woman, you're Sarah. The smartest." Garrett pulled Hannah closer, kissed her forehead. "Thank you for all of this, for seeing something in me beyond a bartender who got lucky, for being patient with me while I figured out how to love again, for loving Zoe like she's yours. She is mine. You both are. Hannah looked up at him, something vulnerable and hopeful in her expression. Which is actually something I wanted to talk to you about. I know we've been taking things slow, being careful not to rush anything, but Garrett, I love you. I love both of you. And I'd like to make this official if you're ready. Move in together or marry me. The words came out before Garrett fully processed he was saying them. But once they were out, he didn't want to take them back. I was going to wait, do this properly with a ring and a romantic dinner and everything. But screw it. Life's too short, and I've wasted enough time being scared. Marry me, Hannah. Join our weird little family officially. Let me spend the rest of my life showing you that the best decision you ever made was walking into that gala 15 months ago. Hannah stared at him, tears streaming down her face. You're serious? You're actually proposing right now in a memorial garden at a community center opening? Is that a no? That's a yes, you ridiculous man. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I want to be part of your weird little family. Yes to all of it. She kissed him then, deep and passionate and full of promise. They broke apart to find Zoe standing a few feet away, grinning like she'd won the lottery. I knew it! I totally knew you were going to propose today. That's why I brought this. She pulled something from behind her back, a small ring box. Ms. Clark helped me pick it out last month. We were going to give it to you tonight, but this works too. Garrett took the box, opened it to find a simple platinum band with 3 small diamonds. One for him, one for Zoe, one for Hannah. You two were in on this together? Of course we were, Hannah said, laughing through her tears. Did you really think I'd let you plan a proposal without help? You're terrible at planning things. I'm standing right here. We know, Dad. That's why we love you. Zoe hugged both of them, and they stood there in the memorial garden. This man who'd learned to live again, this woman who'd learned there was more to life than work, and this girl who'd learned that families could be built in unexpected ways. Inside the community center, the celebration continued. Kids laughed in the art studio, veterans shared stories in the coffee lounge, families explored programs that might change their lives. The Sarah Flynn Community Center was open, fulfilling its mission before it even officially launched. And in the garden, under the San Diego sun, 3 people who'd found each other in darkness embraced in the light. The wedding happened 3 months later, small and intimate at the same beach where Garrett had scattered some of Sarah's ashes. They'd gotten her parents' blessing, a tearful conversation where they'd assured Garrett that Sarah would have wanted him to be happy, would have loved that he'd found someone who honored her memory instead of trying to erase it. Zoe was the flower girl and the ring bearer and the maid of honor all rolled into one, taking her duties very seriously. Jake officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. Thomas and Carlos stood as groomsmen, and Hannah's small circle of actual friends, people she'd neglected during her obsessive work years, stood with her. They wrote their own vows. Hannah promised to love Zoe as fiercely as she loved Garrett, to honor Sarah's memory by being the kind of stepmother who added to their family instead of trying to replace what was lost. To support Garrett's work and his healing, to be patient with his nightmares and hypervigilance, to understand that loving someone who'd survived trauma meant showing up even when it was hard. Garrett promised to let her in completely, to stop trying to protect her by keeping her at a distance, to build a life together that honored both their pasts while creating something new. To love her not despite the complications, but because of them. Because real love was messy and difficult and absolutely worth it. And Zoe gave her own vow, carefully written and practiced. I promise to share my dad with you and to let you be my mom if that's okay. I promise to tell you when I'm sad about my first mom so you don't think I don't like you. And I promise to teach you about sea creatures because everyone should know about octopuses. There wasn't a dry eye on the beach. They honeymooned in Hawaii, all 3 of them, because Zoe was part of this union and they wanted her there for the celebration. They snorkeled and built sandcastles and let Zoe stay up past her bedtime because it was vacation and sometimes rules were meant to be broken. And late one night, after Zoe was asleep in the adjoining hotel room, Garrett and Hannah sat on their balcony watching the ocean and marveling at how life could change so completely in such a short time. Do you ever regret it? Hannah asked, getting pulled back into that life, having to fight and nearly die. If you could go back to bartending and quiet anonymity, would you? Garrett considered the question seriously. I regret that Zoe had to see violence. I regret that Marcus died and that other people got hurt. But do I regret helping you, meeting you, building this life we have now? He pulled her closer. Not for a second. You and Zoe are worth every scar, every nightmare, every terrible moment. You're worth everything. We got lucky, didn't we? That you happened to be bartending that night. That Zoe noticed I was scared. That everything aligned just right for you to be there when I needed you. Maybe it wasn't luck. Maybe it was something else. He thought of Sarah, of her belief in signs and fate and the universe having a plan. Maybe someone was looking out for us, making sure we found each other when we needed it most. I like that idea, that Sarah's watching over us, making sure her family is taken care of. She is. I'm sure of it. Garrett looked up at the stars, feeling a peace he hadn't known in years. Thank you, love, he whispered to the night sky, to Sarah's memory, to whatever cosmic force had brought him through darkness to light. Thank you for this, for them, for second chances. The wind picked up, warm and gentle, carrying the scent of plumeria and ocean salt. And if it felt like an answer, like a reassurance that he'd done right by their daughter and by himself, well, maybe that was just the universe confirming what he already knew. He'd survived. They'd all survived. And now they were building something beautiful from the wreckage. 2 years after that night at the gala, Garrett woke in his new home. Not the small apartment, but a real house with a yard where Zoe could play and a home office where he could work. Hannah was beside him, still sleeping, her dark hair spread across the pillow. Through the open door, he could hear Zoe singing to herself as she got ready for school. His shoulder ached sometimes, especially before rain, a permanent reminder of what he'd survived. He still had nightmares occasionally, still startled at sudden loud noises, still struggled with the hypervigilance that came from years of combat training. But he had a therapist who understood PTSD, and he had a family who loved him through the difficult moments. The Sarah Flynn Community Center was thriving, serving over 500 families in its first year. They'd already broken ground on a second location across town. Garrett consulted there regularly, teaching self-defense classes for women and tactical awareness for at-risk youth, turning his violent skills into tools for empowerment instead of destruction. Hannah's company continued to grow, but she maintained boundaries now, worked hard but went home at reasonable hours, made time for family dinners and weekend trips and all the normal life things she'd missed while building her empire. She was talking about writing a book about work-life balance for women in tech, which Garrett found hilariously ironic given her history. And Zoe, brilliant, resilient, wonderful Zoe, was thriving. Still in therapy, still processing trauma, but growing into a confident, compassionate young woman who wanted to save the oceans and make art, and maybe become a Navy SEAL because her dad was the coolest person ever, and she wanted to be just like him. That last part terrified Garrett, but he'd cross that bridge when they got to it. His phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Got a job offer that might interest you. Nothing dangerous, just security consulting for nonprofit in Kenya. 3 weeks, all expenses paid, chance to do some good. Interested? Garrett looked at his sleeping wife, listened to his daughter's off-key singing, felt the peace of his safe, comfortable home. He thought about the man he'd been 3 years ago, broken, isolated, just surviving day to day. And the man he was now, healing, connected, actually living. He typed back, "Let me talk to my family and get back to you." Because that was the difference now. He didn't make decisions in isolation. He wasn't alone anymore. He had people to consider, people to come home to, people who loved him and needed him and made every choice matter more. Hannah stirred beside him, her eyes opening to find him already awake. "Morning. You're thinking about something serious. I can tell by the forehead crease. Jake has a consulting job in Kenya. 3 weeks. I'm thinking about whether to take it. Do you want to take it?" "Part of me does. The work sounds meaningful, and it's been a while since I traveled anywhere interesting. But I don't want to be away from you and Zoe for 3 weeks. Hannah propped herself up on one elbow, studying his face. "So bring us with you. We could make it a working vacation. Zoe would love seeing African wildlife, and I've been thinking about expanding NeuralSync's educational programs to developing nations. We could scope it out together." "Really? You'd want to come?" "Garrett, we're a family. Where you go, we go. That's the whole point." She kissed him softly. Besides, adventure is more fun when you're not doing it alone. And I trust you to keep us safe. Even in Kenya? Especially in Kenya, you're kind of scary when you're in protection mode. It's very attractive. He laughed, pulling her close. You're ridiculous. And you love me for it. I really do. Zoe appeared in their doorway, already dressed for school in mismatched socks and a t-shirt with a shark on it. Are we going to Kenya? Because I just heard that and I'm totally going to Kenya if we're going to Kenya. They have whale sharks there. Whale sharks, Dad. The biggest fish in the ocean. How long have you been listening at the door? Long enough to know we're having an adventure. Can I bring Splash? She held up her stuffed dolphin, which had seen better days but remained her constant companion. Garrett looked at his daughter's excited face, his wife's warm smile, and felt gratitude wash over him so intense it was almost painful. This was his life now. These were his people. This was what he'd fought for, survived for, rebuilt himself for. Yeah, Zobear, Splash can definitely come to Kenya. She whooped and ran off to start planning, already making lists of animals she wanted to see and facts she needed to research. Hannah laughed, her hand finding Garrett's under the covers. Are you happy? She asked quietly. Garrett thought about the question seriously. Thought about Sarah and the life they'd had, beautiful and ended too soon. Thought about the years of survival that had followed, of being just a dad and nothing more. Thought about the night at the gala when everything changed, when he'd been forced to become more than invisible again. Thought about the journey from that night to this morning. The violence and terror, yes, but also the growth and healing. The found family, the new purpose, the second chance at love he'd never expected to have. Yeah, he said finally, meaning it with every fiber of his being. I'm happy. For the first time in years, I'm actually genuinely happy. Good. You deserve it. You deserve all of this. So do you. After everything you've been through, everything you've built, you deserve peace and love and a weird 9-year-old who's obsessed with marine life. She's the best weird 9-year-old ever, along with being possibly the best artist I know. They lay together in comfortable silence, listening to Zoe's excited chatter from her room as she planned their trip. Outside, San Diego was waking up, traffic building, neighbors leaving for work, another beautiful California day beginning. Garrett's phone buzzed again. This time it was a message to a group chat with several of his nonprofit clients. One was asking about his availability for a training session next month. Another wanted his input on a security assessment for a women's shelter they were opening. A third was just checking in, making sure he was taking care of himself. He'd built this life carefully, intentionally, turned his violent skills into tools for protection and empowerment, found work that felt meaningful without the moral complications of military operations, created a support system of people who understood him and accepted his complicated history. And at the center of it all was the realization that he didn't have to choose between being a father and being someone who helped others. That he could honor Sarah's memory while building a new life with Hannah. That strength wasn't about standing alone. It was about knowing when to let people in. It was about choosing love again and again, even when it was terrifying, especially when it was terrifying. Come on, Hannah said, climbing out of bed and pulling him with her. Let's make pancakes before school. Your terrible character-building pancakes that Zoe pretends to hate but secretly loves. They're not that bad. They're pretty bad, babe, but they're your bad pancakes, which makes them perfect. They made breakfast together, the three of them crowded in the kitchen, laughing and singing and making a mess. Zoe insisted on adding chocolate chips because chocolate made everything better. Hannah tried to flip a pancake and launched it across the room instead, where it stuck to the wall for a glorious moment before sliding down. Garrett burned his thumb on the griddle and made a big show of being mortally wounded until Zoe kissed it better. It was chaotic and imperfect and absolutely perfect. This was his life now, not invisible, not just surviving, but actually living. A former Navy SEAL who'd learned that the greatest mission wasn't overseas combat or protection details. It was showing up every day for the people you loved, being present, being vulnerable, being brave enough to rebuild after loss. The ex-Navy dad who'd prevented a CEO attack had found something better than glory or recognition. He'd found home, found family, found purpose that didn't require violence, though he'd use violence in a heartbeat if they were threatened again. But mostly, he'd found peace. The kind of peace that came from knowing you'd survived the darkness and chosen to build something beautiful on the other side. The kind of peace that came from being loved and loving others with everything you had. And as Garrett Flynn stood in his kitchen with his wife and daughter, eating terrible pancakes and planning adventures and living fully in this moment, he knew that Sarah would be proud. Proud that he'd honored her memory by learning to live again. Proud that he'd given their daughter an expanded family full of love. Proud that he'd chosen hope over fear, connection over isolation, life over mere survival. The quiet bartender had become a protector, a consultant, a husband, a father who was actually present. He'd run toward danger when called and learned when to walk away. He'd fought battles and won, not through violence alone, but through wisdom, love, and the courage to be vulnerable. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all.